across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and happy Friday to you. Thank you so much for gracing me with your presence. What an honour and a privilege. I love being in the company of patriots and pragmatists. Welcome to Talk, the home of common sense. You're stuck with me for the next 3 hours. If you would like to throw in your 2 bits on any of the topics that we are talking about today, it won't cost you anything. It's your normal network rate. Here are the digits. Write them down. 03444 99 1000 is the number. If you want to give the lovely Kieran a call, he will take down your details and he will give you a call back when it's the opportunity to come and talk to me live on air. You don't get as good service like that anywhere else, do you? You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp, 03444 99 1000. If you'd rather send a text message, it is 87222. But if you're going to be old-fashioned and use the SMS option, you've got to write the word talk before you write your message for reasons that I just don't understand. But if you don't do it, well, it just doesn't get to me. It doesn't appear in the Cape Canaveral I have in front of me. Right, OK, let's get on with it because there's a lot to talk about today. Not least, we enter the 4th week of the war against Iran. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the brilliant Simon Diggins, military and defence analyst. Always good to have a warm body in the studio. So what are we looking at now in terms of where we are in week 4? Because for the first time, there's been a bit of a public division now between America and Netanyahu. Trump making it clear to Netanyahu he is essentially the junior partner. But I was thinking to myself, operationally, why weren't these things discussed? It seems strange to me if they've both gone into this war together at the same time that halfway through it's sort of going off and doing their own thing. Yeah,
I think that's a very interesting sort of divide that there's there. I think there is an element even before that, which is an element of strategic incoherence between the two sides. They're all agreed on some things. They're agreed that Iran must not have nuclear weapons. They're agreed that Iran needs to reduce its ballistic missile program. So it can't do what it currently can do, which is threaten quite a lot, lots of the Middle East, but even into Southeast Europe, and Iran has got to stop the proxies which have been harassing Israel and also, frankly, conducting subversion in this country as well. So those 3 aims are all very clear. The 4th aim was always a very difficult one, which was this business about whether or not they were also looking for regime change. And I think this is where the incoherence comes between the two things. For Israel, they're looking for a regime change, or at least an Iran that's so occupied by itself, so broken up, even frankly in chaos, that it can no longer threaten Israel. And that's not necessarily where Trump is. So there's a sort of strategic sort of divide there somewhere. And I think that's now being reflected in what we've just seen over the last couple of days with his attack on the gas fields in terms of some operational incoherence as well. Initially, that didn't happen. Initially, they seemed to have a very good divide between targeting according to the appropriate weapons they could bring to the party. But we're now kind of, as you say, 3 weeks into this, a lot of the Iranian military capability has been taken down, and so they're looking now for the appropriate targets. And I think that's why that little fissure that has always existed has actually shown itself into this operational divide, which has created this current immediate crisis.
Let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz, because the huge impact globally, Iran knows this, it's clearly why they're targeting oil and gas fields as well as trying to block the Strait of Hormuz to try and essentially precipitate a global economic crisis, and by gum are we on the brink of that. But how does America now go about defending the Strait of Hormuz? My understanding is they're using, is it the A-10 Warthog, C-10, A-10 Warthog, going into, try and take out the little Iranian boats that might be lacing mines or targeting ships. And what's NATO's involvement in all of this? What is going on with the Europeans?
Yeah, I think this is the challenge. I mean, the fact that Iran was going to threaten the Straits of Hormuz was entirely predictable. I mean, anyone who looked at it would say that's the obvious thing to go and do, as indeed they've done it in the past. So this is not a new issue that suddenly sprung on the Americans. They've always had a thing to do with it. But actually, the way they've got to go about it is different. So for conducting a strategic or an operationally level offensive, where you're taking out missile sites well inside Iran itself, to, as you rightly say, an A-10 Warthog, which is a ground attack aircraft, looking for individual boats to go and engage along a very long stretch of coastline with all the inlets, little fishing smacks, all the rest of it. And that's what they've got to go and do. What are the Europeans doing about it? I think they're doing what we've been seeing with our own country. We're in the age of delusion. Where a strongly worded memo is supposed to achieve what, frankly, a fleet of ships needs to go and do, and all the forces that go with it. I don't think it's serious.
See, I get the impression that first of all, they're like, we're not going to get involved, this is nothing to do with us, and now they're like, OK, we will come and help defend the Strait of Hormuz. And I wonder if this sort of NATO lip service is more about, because how could it even remotely be possible? There's so many assets that are shared that, you know, whether we want to be involved or not, we are. Whether we like it or not, we are. And I get the impression that some of the lip service coming out of the European countries is more to appease people back at home, with the risk that, you know, perhaps Iran now could start triggering sleeper cells in European countries to extend warfare to our own streets.
That could also be, and of course the other person they're looking to influence, if you like, indirectly, is President Trump. I mean, Trump and the American establishment have been very critical, I think rightly so in many respects, of the Europeans and their attitude towards their own defence and their own security, and indeed their own national interests. I mean, I cannot imagine a situation even 50 years ago where a prominent strait like this, one of the key strategic choke points in the world, you know, if a nation threatened against it, a country like Britain, still a member of the P5, still regard itself one of the great powers, still one of the largest defence expenders in the world, even the sixth largest defence spender, would not automatically think, no, we are engaged with this. You know, almost regardless of who started the fight, they say, no, the freedom of navigation is important. And other European countries are in exactly the same position.
But we got rid of our minesweepers, didn't we?
Well,
Essentially, we've kind of basically got nothing in the Navy. Turns out there are no boats.
There are no. And the last minesweeper from the Gulf was one of the last ships that left in Middleton, and that left under tow. So, you know, we've that's the whole issue. We've kind of given up on the things we used to do just naturally as part of what we understood to be our role in the world, which was, you know, no longer an imperial power, but still a country with global trading instincts, global sort of requirements to support freedom of navigation. And so we'd see ourselves involved in such a conflict, as almost regardless. But we've seemed to have given up on all that, handed the problem over to the Americans or somebody else, or even flimsier, tried to rely on international law to try and protect ourselves. And we are where we are.
International law, which is always gamed by the countries such as Iran.
Exactly.
I mean, where do you see this going in the medium term? Because, of course, Israel, as you said rightly, wants to see a regime change. You can't blame them. They've had these mad ayatollahs and crazy clerics on their doorstep threatening to blow them up for a long time. And the idea of a sort of democratic, you know, secular Persia must be very appealing to them. But, you know, Netanyahu, it seems, understands that this would involve ground troops. Do you think that is going to come to pass? Is America going to essentially get rid of all of the weaponry systems, which is their intent, and then basically say to Israel, right, do what else you want afterwards?
Well, I think there may be. I think because Israel will at that point say, no, we've got a strategic interest which is above and beyond, if you like, the defanging of the Iranian regime, which I think is effectively where America says its interest in that. It's still got a long-term interest. But the numbers and the kind of size of the country and everything make this impossible to understand. I mean, you know, we don't have anything like, I say we advisedly, I'm talking about the West here, anything like the kind of ground forces in place to it. It's not to say that limited military operations might not take place. You know, one of the options, for example, in terms of clearing the Straits of Hormuz and making it safe for traffic, sea traffic going through, might well be some limited occupation of some of the islands and limited engagement commando-type raids against some of the IRGC bases that are actually on that north side of the Straits of Hormuz. So we might see that. But you know, Iran is a country of 93 million. It's huge. You know, we are nowhere near in a position to conduct anything like even like the 2003 invasion of Iraq, and that's not, I think, on the cards. The idea of the boots on the ground, I think the assumption was the boots on the ground would be the Iranian people rising up again, and they would be effectively the boots on the ground. And at the moment, because of what's happened and the repression that took place, I think that's not on the cards.
Let's talk now about this is a grand opportunity for Volodymyr Zelensky, ironically. My understanding was Ukraine a while ago went over to America and said, look, we've come up with all these systems to try and combat drone warfare. And the Americans like, yeah, whatever. He's clearly just trying to flog his goods because he wants to get on our good side. But now he's become Mr. Indispensable. You know, they're actually sending people to, you know, to the Middle East, to places like Saudi, and their anti-drone technology, which I think is going to work out very well for Ukraine in the end, because I'd imagine these countries will then have a sort of a debt of gratitude, and we might start to see on the other side of whatever's going to happen in Iran a bit more support.
Yeah, I hope so. I really do hope so, because of actually the two conflicts are now basically linked together. So we've also seen the Russians providing intelligence to the Iranians, and they've also been helping the Iranians with some of the drone technology, their updated drone technology, and also some advice about how to use the drones based on their combat experience. So on the other side of the equation, we've already got those two wars linked, and there's also the linkage with the rise in oil prices. One of the great ironies, one of the difficulties about having the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed is that in order to keep the global economy going, America has reduced some of its tariffs and some of its sanctions against elements of the Russian oil economy, which means that that oil is now flowing, keeping the economy going, but of course that money flows straight back into Putin's coffers and therefore straight to the prosecution of the war in Ukraine. So we've now got two campaigns, formally separate, but they're not really. Iranian technology and Russian technology together, and Ukrainian technology with Gulf support also part of it. So we've got two ongoing conflicts working at the same time.
Let's go back to the situation for Britain. I mean, we are in a mess. We've been exposed for basically not having a navy that's operational. I think the last thing I read, we weren't going to be sending any warships to theatre in case they get targeted. I mean, it's a warship going into war. What do you think's going to happen? Not that I'd wish, poor outcomes for our navy, but it's really quite embarrassing. We've got Cyprus now saying, well, I'm not sure we want Akrotiri as an airbase here anymore. If you're not going to defend it, that makes us very vulnerable. And then at the same time, back home in the United Kingdom, just when we need to be having a very serious conversation about the influence of the IRGC, we've got this definition of Islamophobia. We had this mass public praying in Trafalgar Square. When J.D. Vance was asked, which Muslim nation's going to be the first, which Islamist nation's going to be the first to have a nuclear weapon, he said Britain. The only thing he got wrong there is whether or not we've got operational nuclear weapons. I'm terrified. I'm terrified about how deeply rooted and pernicious the Islamist influence in this country now is.
No, I think it's very fair. I mean, and we've had public statements, and they're still quite rare. We've had public statements from people like MI5, the security service, basically outlining the 20-plus plots that have taken place. There's ongoing court cases at the moment against individuals who are Iranian spies. We know that IRGC basically pushed out one of your colleagues and journalist outfit, Iran TV, because of the level of violence and intimidation that they were ongoing. And then you have this kind of more quiet, soft influence. So, you need to be nice to our Islamist or Muslim brothers and sisters, through these various front organisations. Where I just noticed the other day that the Charity Commission had sent them some guidance on their behaviour, and we've still got the IRGC is still legal in this country.
It's mad. Why do you think it's not being prescribed? Because my sort of working hypothesis, a bit like my understanding is that the reasons that the Hamas commanders were all holed up in fancy apartments in Doha was partly under the CIA's request so they could keep eyes on. And I wonder whether or not there's a sort of tacit understanding that allowing the IRGC to operate here enables our intelligence services to take the lead on monitoring their operations. Or is that a little bit too hopeful?
No, I think that's part of the argument the FCDO put forward. I mean, they say that they need it, and they don't talk about it in kind of espionage terms. They talk about it in terms of, say, we need to maintain diplomatic links to the Iranians. I question whether that's actually necessary at the moment. I can give a personal example. In 2009, after the last major Iran revolt, I think it was the so-called Green Revolution of 2009, I was working in the embassy in Kabul at the time, defence attaché at the time in Kabul, and we had very strange relations with the Iranians. We were told after the suppression of that revolt, no more contact with them. It took several years before any more contact took place. So given what was going on at the moment, there's absolutely no reason why we can't do it. If we ever need to go and talk to Iranians who are not members of the IRGC, it ain't difficult. But we really don't need to have them here operating on our streets, subverting our people, and basically doing all the kind of the stuff you just talked about in terms of the slow Islamification of this country, so tolerance of frankly unacceptable behaviour. And I think we need to stop that. We need to show some backbone. Which might be hard to show at the moment.
I mean, how concerned as well? I mean, I've seen for a long time how Islamists have hijacked the charity sector, the so-called community leaders who come on, who are largely the ones pushing for these Islamophobia definitions. But there are, various ways in which Islamism operates, and one of them is through this sort of slow, gradual penetration and takeover of the bricks and mortar of democracies and political systems. How concerned should we be about essentially the fact that it seems that Islamists have hijacked the Green Party, and the Green Party Party not only now seem to have a coterie within their numbers that have some pretty radical views, but are doing very well in the polls.
Yeah, and I think they're one of these parties who've got two faces. I mean, anyone who thinks they're out there just looking after sort of fluffy animals and green spaces, they've long since left that behind. They've become a much more kind of radical organisation, and there is this really strange linkage, which is one could trace back apparently to the 60s and 70s, where the kind of the far left, basically thwarted by social democracy, whatever you think of social, but they're thwarted by social democracy, then identified the Muslim populations of the world as the most oppressed peoples in the world, and they sort of embraced and endorsed that, and the Palestinian struggle was part of that, even though a lot of Palestinians are A, Christian, or B, secular, but then nonetheless they kind of embraced that as an idea. And I think those things, those currents are all sort of coming together at the moment, and we no longer have Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was very obvious.
Do we not have Al-Qaeda anymore?
We have other, but Al-Qaeda was a very public sort of statement of Islamist intent. So it was quite easy to kind of knock down, and they hollowed out Afghanistan. They conducted those dreadful attacks on 9/11. So they've kind of got underground. They haven't disappeared, but they've spread their roots now under the ground. Whereas before, under Bin Laden, it was up there, direct attacks on USS Cole, the attacks on the embassies in places like Tanzania and Kenya, and they realise all that does is produce a reaction.
Right.
So don't have the reaction. Spread underground, and you build from the bottom. It's a bit like the woke ideology. Where did that come from? It's Gramscian. You start at the bottom. You start with institutions. You rot the institutions from inside, and people like you and I who think you're looking at something, suddenly something you've taken for granted as, well, that's how we do business. Suddenly it's not what you see. All you've got is this facade.
It's a very interesting topic of conversation. Right, we're going to take a short break. Don't go anywhere, because there's a lot more interesting topics of conversation to come. I'm back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Well, we've decided we're going to kidnap Simon Diggins because he's just far too interesting and knows far too much. So we thought we'd have another bite of the cherry. We were talking about the Green Party just before the break. I think there's something very peculiar going on here because having been in politics a long time myself, at home and abroad, you don't suddenly get from zero to whoosh, where the Green Party are, with all this publicity, without some very sophisticated, very well-funded curation, particularly online. Then all of a sudden, the Green Party's like, bam, you know, really high in the polls. The Islamists are in there. The deputy leader, I mean, you know, he said some choice things on social media. The legacy media obviously never talk about this because, oh, they're just lovely. Look at them. They want to hug trees and wear rainbow lanyards. I think the Islamists know exactly what they're doing. It's a perfect conceit, a perfect device for them to be in with the Green Party, looking all nice and cuddly. But I wonder if there is a curation, a level up from this, whether that, you know, because when I look at things like, you know, sudden prominence online, I think bot farms and I think foreign interference.
It may well be true. I mean, certainly what I've noticed with the Green Party is, as you say, they're a very sophisticated social media campaign. Yeah. And Polanski, who I have absolutely no time for whatsoever. Obviously, he's changed his name. You know, I think we should call him. He's called David, so we might call him David. He is very clever at appealing to young people. I watched a film of him at a sort of pro-trans lobbying event. It was a kind of public event, and he played the audience as you'd expect him to be. He's a stage hypnotist, you know. That's kind of what he was. But he knows how to play. He knows how to play to youth, and he knows how to play to the audience, and a few sort of soft messages from there. So a very, very sophisticated operation, and it may well be foreign inspired. I mean, there's one statistic that came out, I think, from the June 25 bombing campaign of Iran, that after one of these campaign hits against an IRGC headquarters, 3/4 of the pro-independence SNP bots disappeared.
Exactly.
So I think it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest that whatever the message they've got, it's being magnified and driven by people who have distinctly malign intent towards this country.
I wonder if our security service, I mean, they must be looking into this sort of stuff.
They are, but of course it's difficult because it's a legitimate party, and you've still got people like Caroline Lucas who comes up and talks, and she talks about what you might call traditional green issues, and then she's obviously delighted that from a different generation there appears to be this kind of new resurgence of interest in the Green Party. Yeah. You know, part of the other thing, of course, is, you know, who do they appeal to? There's clearly they're quite, you know, they're shameless about their appeal to, you know, their ethnic and community appeal. They're completely shameless about that. But the other side, of course, is, you know, is the, if you like, the failure of the mainstream parties. They're all struggling to find a constituency from there. You know, that's part of the lesson from Gorton and Denham. You know, the Labour Party was in bits. The one candidate who could have possibly won from there, Andy Burnham, they chose not to put in place, and so that creates a space into which, frankly, rank flowers and weeds are allowed to grow. So there's another issue about, you know, where our mainstream political parties are at the moment. They're just not really appealing to anybody. I
mean, this is it. People who look at the Greens go, well, they're just innocuous. Well, it's faddy. I'm concerned because we're coming up to local elections. They are going to take councils, especially across London. They're going to take councils. Zach Polanski was doing an interview with Nick Robinson, and they're talking about where they're going to target seats. Now, I know in the previous election, the Muslim Vote, which is an organisation connected to, again, some pretty interesting other organisations, had eyes on, in future, targeting 98 seats. Well, they've basically folded into the Green Party now. And Zach Polanski was saying to Nick Robinson, well, you know, when I first became leader, I said, let's try and get 30 seats. That now looks under-ambitious. And we've got to a stage where he's talking about he wants to hold the balance of power, which, looking at Gorton and Denton, looking at polling, if you're going to take a snapshot right now, that could happen. You could end up with a super left coalition. And this is a man who, surprise, surprise, is talking about reducing the amount of time terror suspects can be held from 14 days to 4 days. I mean, if that hasn't come out of the playbook of people like the IRGC, where's it come from?
No, I think exactly it. And you look at who's also the group who are most anti-prevent legislation. You know, endless complaints about prevent legislation. again coming from Islamist front organisations. That's kind of where it is. So he's unashamedly appealing to a segment of our population. If you put election leaflets out in Urdu, there's only one group you're aiming to.
Some of those campaign videos were staggering.
Well,
sort of Netanyahu, Modi. It was basically just appealing to the baser instincts of the Muslim community.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's horribly divisive because that's not how a lot of people think. A lot of Muslims think they don't want to be identified and seen to be identified by part of their identity. And we've all got multiple identities: our faith, our religion, our background, our family background. They're all part of our identity. What we've done is made from there. Nakedly appealing to the very narrowest, smallest bit of a particular community who can be sometimes quite isolated, whatever. And doing it through Urdu, using a foreign language in this country. There's only one reason to do that, and that because nobody else is going to do that. So what are we going to see? All the parties now trying to appeal that? Where does this sense of the kind of idea of loyal opposition? I always think the essence of democracy is this idea, His Majesty's loyal opposition. But you can't have a loyal opposition if effectively you've divided, segmented off one bit of the population, say we're going to talk to you separately. You're not part of this bit, but we're going to talk to you separately. That's why he's so dangerous, because he will divide the country, and it's not divide on political grounds, which is legitimate, but on ethnic grounds.
We've seen this politically happening in Lebanon. Hezbollah, an organisation, frankly, that doesn't care for democracy because Islamists do not. Infiltrating democracy in that country, starting off as a niche vote. Before you know it, they've taken over the area around the airport in Beirut. Then they grow. Increasingly now, Islamists are using politics as their vehicle to take control. How concerned should we be looking at what's just happened with the mass prayers, the iftar, the adhan, the call to prayer ringing out over Trafalgar Square? I think it's horrifying. It's horrifying. But not just that. We have a Labour government actively trying to prevent us criticising this, sort of saying that this is all wonderful and peaceful and isn't this glorious? Isn't this a multicultural, utopia? I wonder how many years it's going to be until we find ourselves in the same situation that Lebanon's found themselves in today.
Yeah, I think we've already got the balkanisation of parts of our cities, and that's really sad. I mean, one doesn't want to over-exaggerate that, and I think some of the language that's come out of the American right has been unhelpful in that respect because it's been a caricature. But there are people within our society who will be happy for our society to be balkanised. So I think we need to be honest about that. I think the what happened in Trafalgar Square was simply wrong. I mean, the Adnan, which is the call to prayer, and I've lived in Muslim countries. I served in the Omani army for 2 years. So I'm A, not anti-Muslim, and B, I completely understand what's going on. But those things like that, the Adnan, the call to prayer, is essentially an assertion of dominance of Islam. It basically says, no, Allah is our message. Muhammad, God bless him, is his prophet. And it's not exactly, and then everybody else is unbelievers. And that in this country, and to have Mayor Sadiq Khan sitting there taking part of it is just absurd. And of course it's in Trafalgar Square. The premier, the height of, and on almost the same week is that we're struggling to get a single ship into the Middle East. It's kind of, you couldn't get a more simple, iconic statement of the state of Britain today, where we've got to. We can't deploy a ship in Trafalgar Square, and we have this assertion of dominance of a minority.
Oh, we live in very dangerous times. Simon, thank you for doing the extra bit with us as well. What a fantastic, fascinating conversation. Right, we're going to take a short break now. If you want to wade into the chit-chat, then feel free. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial if you'd like to have a conversation with me on the phone, patched live through to the studio. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send a text message instead. If you're going to do that, like the word talk before you text. I'll see you in just a moment.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Shall we squeeze in a call before we move on? Because we've got Khalid on the line from Leicester. Good morning to you, Khalid.
Hi, Alex.
I'm very well. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad.
So what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm saying, as far as Iran is concerned, I mean, Israel and America should just wipe Iran out.
So you support what Trump is doing, and you'd like to see the destruction of the regime?
What I'm saying is they'll get away with it anyway, like they've done in Gaza. They kill all the innocent men, women, children, taking all the land, even the West Bank, and that's Israel's plan. The point is, Israel has a plan. We know that. Netanyahu showed the whole world the greater Israel map, taking away parts of Lebanon, which they're doing, Syria, they're doing, Iraq, which they're doing, parts of in fact, just last week, Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli Prime Minister, he stated straight categorically. He said that the Turkey is the new Iran. They've got plans, their eyes on Turkey as well. So the whole point
you really think that Israel wants to take over Turkey?
Parts of Turkey. What it is, the point is, the greater Israel map. If you look at it, Plan Dalet. You heard about Plan Dalet, don't you? I'm sure you know. Right, Plan Dalet, that's been there, is documented. Anybody, the whole world can look it up, and it's there documented that Israel has a plan to create this greater Israel. Even they've had this plan for decades, and now they're carrying it out with the use of America. The point is, America.
Hold on. I mean, look, come on now. We have seen an Iranian regime for decades openly talk about wanting to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. We have seen the sponsorship of terrorism via the proxies. We've seen direct attacks on Israel on a regular basis. Of course, they're not going to want the current Iranian regime as their next door neighbour. It doesn't mean they're wanting to take over Iran. I think that's a bit of a stretch. That's a bit of a stretch of the imagination.
There's no stretch of the imagination, Alex. Who would have thought that they'll wipe out the Gazan population? One is talk, one is action.
They haven't wiped out the Gazan population. In fact, the Gazan population actually grew despite there being war there. Khalid, this stuff is sort of on the sort of even more crazy end of conspiracy theory. Israel's not trying to take over Iran. It just doesn't want a murderous regime on its doorstep that wants to obliterate it.
So you think nobody was killed in Gaza? Was that all fairy tales?
No, I think people died in Gaza because there was a war in Gaza, which has got a very concentrated urban population. So therefore, there is going to be a degree of collateral damage. And let's not forget why that ended up taking place. Who was using the money to build the tunnels to then try and attack Israel? This didn't just come out of nowhere, did it?
Oh, collateral damage, is that what it's called? I must be mistaken. You know the 6-year-old Hind Rajab, 6-year-old, whose car was blasted with 355 bullets. That was amazing collateral damage. And the guy who did it has been named, and he's not been prosecuted. 355 bullets in a car with a 6-year-old in. That is collateral. That is downright murder, Alex. That is murder,
okay.
and you are
Khalid, look, horrible things happen in war. There is no doubt about that. And I suppose when the dust is settled and everything's reviewed about what went on in Gaza, we may start drawing some conclusions at that stage. But it does seem to me you kind of live down the weirdest wormholes of the World Wide Web with some of your theories about the greater map of Israel. But do you know what? This is the home of free speech, and I thank you ever so much for your call. Well, that was an interesting take, wasn't it? Let's focus our attention back to domestic politics now, because the COVID inquiry rumbles on. That has raised its head once again. And it turns out that the inquiry believes that the government's stay-at-home slogan actually cost lives, particularly because it sent the message that healthcare was closed. So people who needed to go get diagnoses and treatments just weren't going to hospital, but also that do not resuscitate notices were being forced upon COVID patients. Let's speak to Carl Hennigan, Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford. Carl, every time, I pay attention to this inquiry, I live in hope. I live in hope that they're going to come up with a conversation around whether or not locking everybody up was a good idea completely. Well, at least they're nudging on the idea that the stay-at-home slogan might have stopped people accessing healthcare. But, I mean, is this inquiry actually going to ask probably the biggest question that needs to be asked, which is, was the whole strategy around containing everybody at home the right approach to take?
It's not going to go there and ask that. If you remember in Module 2, it reported that actually locking down earlier might have been a strategy that saved lives, which is a direct contradiction now with the fact that we locked down and shut the NHS was catastrophic decision-making, particularly the slogan, stay home, protect the NHS, save lives, actually it just worked too well. And what happened is it shifted people's behaviours, and people didn't think about protecting the NHS. They thought about protecting themselves and staying away from the NHS. And actually that was hugely consequential and dangerous. I think that's one messaging that politicians have to be clear about. They made a huge error. But the second one, which you're talking about, is this idea that when people were dying in the last moments of their lives, and I have first-hand experience of this. I'm an urgent care GP who did home visits into care homes. I went to see people who were dying, and the family were outside at the window watching it. That should never, ever be allowed to happen ever again. There are important moments in your life, whether at the birth, maybe when you get married, but particularly when somebody, a loved one, dies, it is a hugely influential time in your life. And what we did, I just think, was discompassionate and completely wrong. So there are issues in this module that actually are moving in the right direction. And there are recommendations that say we have to do things differently going forward. But there's one important issue. It talks about the problem of the surge in capacity required and the health service wasn't fit for purpose. The big problem is we can't even deal with the winter crisis, let alone a pandemic. So if we can't fix what happens in winter, how are we ever going to get in a position to respond to a pandemic? So we have huge lessons now to learn about let's be prepared even for an acute respiratory infection in the middle of winter and work out what we need in emergency and urgent care.
Are you of the belief that the way that COVID was handled as a round was the right way or the wrong way? Because it's been a while since we sort of had this conversation publicly. But I've always been keen to dig deeper into whether Sweden had the right approach or not, where they didn't lock up the healthy population, but said, get on with your lives, but let's be mindful about how we do that. And at the same time, shield those people who are vulnerable. Is there still a debate to be had about that? Or, you know, now the government's created this big red stay-at-home button. Are we at risk that the next thing that appears, be it swine flu, meningitis B, whatever, that they're just going to hit that button again because we're not prepared? We haven't sort of thought about what we did during COVID and the impact it's had.
So there are two issues. Number one, I think it's quite clear to many viewers and listeners to talkTV, and my position is different from that of the government, always have been all along, and that's why Julie has had me on so many times to discuss the issues at hand. The key problem was not that now with the looking back in time everything seems ridiculous, rules of six, all of these 2 meter distancing. Why at the time, in the midst of the panic, was actually it's not a mainstream view to have discussion and have arguments about what was the way forward. In the midst of the panic, all of it was sidelined, and what you did is have flooding people who didn't have any medical training, didn't understand how healthcare works, and they set the precedent and the policies of the day. I'm not sure we'll ever get to a point that we'll look at this in the round and say, actually, we had lots of problems. Why? Most of the people who are in positions of power have gone. Most of them are in a defensive mode. You don't hear anything from them anymore about their positions and why they were wrong. I don't think we'll ever get really to the truth about, particularly in that April, May 2020, what did people die of? What were the real consequences of shutting down the healthcare system? And what we call the iatrogenic harm of not having healthcare, so that people were dying in their homes of heart attacks or strokes, and we weren't there for them as an NHS.
I mean, just the other day, I was walking down to go and see the pro-Iranian regime protest on the South Bank, which took me past that COVID memorial wall. And I saw the hearts there and this, that and the other. And I thought to myself, it's the way that, you know, the pandemic was sort of, what's the word, not fetishised or idolised, but I don't know, like it was, I found a lot of this stuff very strange. And we didn't have the conversations ever that, frankly, a lot of people who were dying of this disease were extremely vulnerable, susceptible to die from most things anyway.
which is what you see normally with a seasonal pathogen. You get an age gradient where the very elderly are affected. In fact, what you did see that was different to some infections, which you see now, is actually young people and particularly under fives completely unaffected.
Yeah.
So that should have immediately told you to change the emphasis and the way forward. But I think you're right. We live in a world where most of the media is catastrophizing all events. To get your attention means we have to big up the sort of the panic, the fear, and in doing so, then we'll get your attention. To me, every death counts. People will have died this winter. They're all important. I think there are particular issues where we find ourselves in society with the 24-hour news cycle, the social media, the advance of new technology. There are people who made lots of money in the pandemic who did very well out of it. All of this should be in the inquiry to say, what were the forces that led to this panicked reaction, which in the light of day, I think for history will look at it and say, this was a moment of mass hysteria.
I think it's a moment of mass hysteria. I think it was quite sinister. Where's COVID now? Where is it? It hasn't disappeared, has it? We're no longer all being made to get vaccinations. One assumes it still circulates in society. And that, I mean, what's happened? Is it that we're just, not as susceptible to it anymore because we've all had it? Was it never that dangerous? Because, we're not talking about the R rate or how many people are dying of COVID today, but one assumes it hasn't disappeared into the ether.
No, so it's still circulating at low levels, along with the other coronaviruses, but along with the other 30 acute respiratory agents that commonly circulate in the community. At the moment, influenza, RSVs, all of those that were supposed to be the super flu have come right down. The coronaviruses, including COVID, are right down. We see agents like rhinovirus, which call the common cold, which are a bit higher. So none of these have gone away. They come and go with laws sometimes that we don't fully understand, but we know they circulate much more in winter in the Northern Hemisphere than in summer. At the moment, areas like New Zealand and Australia are preparing for their winter season and talking up what the issues are at hand. So they've not gone away. They're endemic. What happens is over time, as we catch these agents, we develop an immunity, which means it protects us from severe disease. And that's why we get the common cold quite often. There are sometimes you get them more often if you've got young children or you work in certain environments, you're more likely to be susceptible to them. But actually what happens is the disease you get is milder and milder because you've got this inbuilt immunity from catching these things. Probably on average 1 or twice a year by the time you're an adult. When you're a young child, it can be 4 or 5 times a year. And so you're right. The point you make is the people who are most susceptible are those with the immune issues, and that tends to be the very elderly. And that's the strategy. How are we going to have a strategy for protecting care homes and those people in hospital?
Finally, before I let you go, what do you make of this meningitis outbreak? I mean, it's pretty troubling. This is a very serious disease. I can't remember seeing an outbreak of meningitis in recent years like this.
Well, Wes Streeting described it as unprecedented. Many have. I would not call it unprecedented. I would call it unusual. Yeah. If you've been around long enough, you'll remember going back to the 1990s and early noughties that actually meningitis was prevalent and often in the news. We had lots of campaigns like the glass test and the jar test. So there is a time when we remember it. This is unusual because of the number of young adults that were affected in this one environment. It's more than 10 now, I believe, went to the nightclub. That's what's unusual about it. But pre-pandemic, there was about 650 cases a year. The big key issue about meningitis is that it is not common. It is not like COVID where the transmission is for everybody, but the problem is the case fatality rate is very high. So it's a serious disease that it's right for us to operate with a very precautionary. So if I see somebody in out of hours, I think they've got meningitis, I'm immediately going to give them antibiotics before working out whether it's the confirmed diagnosis or not. But
Carl, thank you ever so much. Always great to catch up with you. Carl Hennigan there, Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford. Now, let's bring our attention back to that mass Muslim prayer event that took place in Trafalgar Square. Nigel Farage condemned the event. Equally, as did Danny Kruger MP, who's the Reform UK MP for East Wiltshire. He joins us now. Danny, how alarmed should we be about what took place? I'm horrified by it. I think it shows a society that is very flagrantly, openly, audaciously being, essentially under attack from Islamists. But what do you make of this?
Well, obviously, I'm concerned about it. I think it shows a country that doesn't have a strong sense of itself. We should obviously allow people to pray in their own way, including in public, by the way. I don't think we should be banning public demonstrations of religious faith. But there is a question of degree here, and I think I'm very concerned about the fact that we're allowing what is plainly a sort of an assertion of kind of a claim of the land, of the civic realm of our country on behalf of Islam, and I regret that.
In terms of the attacks on principally Nick Timothy, who was the first person to come out and really say, look, this is a show of domination. He's now had an angrily worded letter from, surprise, many of the Muslim pro-Gaza MPs in Parliament. But, the sentiments have been echoed by our Prime Minister, who's still hell-bent on pushing this Islamophobia definition or anti-Muslim hostility. Has the Labour Party essentially been captured?
Well, I mean, the fact is, many Labour MPs are reliant for their seats on the votes of Muslims who are themselves strongly influenced by imams and teachers who I think promote quite a divisive narrative, and who do have the explicit objective of making the whole world, Britain included, Muslim. And this demonstration that we saw in Trafalgar Square, I think, is part of that. As I say, it's a sort of claim to the civic realm on behalf of Islam, which I don't think most British Muslims want, actually, but it is clearly the objective of many influential community leaders, and I think we should stand against it much more resolutely. Obviously, as I say, we need to allow people to pray in their own way, but I think there's a question of degree, and when you need permission, as you do for an event on this scale, I don't think that permission should have been granted.
Initially, Reform UK were, I think, a little bit trepidatious about tackling the Islam issue, and actually, receiving quite a lot of criticism from people for being maybe a little bit too lily-livered on this subject. But I think that seems to be rapidly changing. Is the party going to, at some point, announce policy on what it's going to do about Islamism in this country?
Well, the answer to that is yes, we will. And there is a challenge both of extremism and how to ensure that young Muslims are not put onto the conveyor belt of radicalisation. There's a question of cohesion, how we overcome the segregation in our communities. But it goes much deeper than that. I think all of us as people living in this country need to be reminded of the values and the institutions and the traditions that hold us together. I think the reason why Islam is so strong in so many places is because there's the absence of a clear call on behalf from the country as a whole about what it is to be British. So I think we have a challenge of identity and culture that runs through our country. It infects all sorts of people. So I believe that reform will stand for a re-communication of the essential principles of what it is to be British and how, as a state, we should reinforce that without trampling on individual liberty or insisting that anybody believes in any particular religion. But as you probably know, my personal view is that Christianity remains the most effective kind of cohering agent of our society. It created the institutions which made our country. And that's why I personally am delighted to see large Christian demonstrations in Trafalgar Square, because I think that reflects the fact that this is it, which remains a Christian country. And I think we need to be less embarrassed about saying that.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. You and I both big fans of the late, great Jesus Christ. Danny Kruger, MP, thank you ever so much for giving us your time today. OK, we're going to take a short break, but you know the rules. If you want to join us with your views, 03444 991 1000 is the number to dial. We're going to be taking some calls after this next break, so roll up, roll up. It's your opportunity to share your thoughts on air. 03444 991 1000 is also the number if you'd like to send me a WhatsApp message or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send a text message. If you are going to send a text, write the word talk before you message. OK, I'll see you in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Shall we hit up the phone lines? Indeed we shall, because we've got Aliondo, who's in Hertfordshire. Good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good morning. How are you, Alex? You okay?
I'm not too bad. I'm not too bad. A little bit weary, but I am just about surviving. What can I do you for today?
Okay, so I would like to speak about some of the things that you have mentioned on your radio show so far today. Mm-hmm. And I would like to do things as I am a champion of British values and British culture as a Muslim. And I think one of the primary essences of British culture and British value is giving somebody the opportunity to speak, which you are giving me now. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, yes. Please continue.
Awesome. So the narrative that you are peddling in your segment is very, very detrimental to Muslims. You are saying that the Muslims have taken over Trafalgar Square because they have an authorized prayer. You are calling it an act of dominance. But think about this. Use your logic. This is not an act of dominance. This is an act of submission. They are prostrating on the floor. You will not find man in a weaker position prostrating on the floor. The same Trafalgar Square is occupied multiple times during the year by far-right activists who are cursing the Islamic God, who are cursing the Islamic Prophet. Nothing is happening there. You can see the video clips. There are other faiths who are also utilizing and using Trafalgar Square for their own celebrations and for their own festivities. There is never an issue made. The fact that you call this an act of dominance is clearly just
But okay, so hear me out, and thank you so much for calling. I really appreciate it, and it's always great to have a discussion. At the very least, right, people regarded this and, you know, I am among them, and there are plenty more like me, as extremely provocative, in the same way that it would be extremely provocative were a big group of Christians to go, you know, start openly praying in the centre of Marrakesh. You don't need much emotional intelligence to actually understand that. Surely you can, you can sympathise with people who say this is a Christian country, seeing en masse, a lot of people in the very centre of London, in one of our greatest squares, shouting Allahu Akbar, was upsetting to a lot of people.
Absolutely. I'm glad you've broached this question. So would you also feel the same way if it was Hindus worshipping their idols or having effigies in Trafalgar Square, which they have done and which they do every single year, and the Sikh community, the Jewish community, would you feel the same way? Or is it just the Islamic community that you have issues with?
Would I feel the same way? Look, there's always a Diwali celebration, but it tends to be, you know, Bhangra dancing and nice food, rather than it being an openly religious ceremony in Trafalgar Square. I know because I've been a number of times.
Please clarify the difference between Diwali being somehow different to a Muslim prayer, which is, you know, very uniformed, and like I said, they are prostrating, they are bowing, so they are in a weak position, and it's known as an act of submission.
But the difference is, like I said, the Diwali celebrations in Trafalgar Square do not consist of a lot of Hindus sitting there and chanting Hindu mantras together. It is a celebration of music and dance and food.
Alex,
but what we saw, and actually, do I have more of an issue with Islam than the other religions? Yes, I do, Aliondo. I'll explain why. Because this country has suffered at the hand of Islamist terrorism. It has taken multiple lives, where they're looking at the Ariana Grande bombings, the 7/7 bombings. We can see what's going on in the world in terms of the instability in the Middle East from Islamist theocratic regimes. The grooming gangs. Look, I don't think it is irrational for some people, especially, may I just say, women, to be slightly fearful of certain types of Islam. And I say that as a person who has actually lived in Muslim countries, so have no problem with Islam as a whole. But the way that on occasion, it's being used in Britain is terrifying.
So can you now determine that those people in Trafalgar Square were Islamists?
Well, no, I can't. But what I would say in the context of everything going on is it was extremely provocative. Look, unfortunately, Aliondo, I'm not getting rid of you, but I've got to go to a break. The countdown is in my ear. But thank you ever so much for your call. Right, taking a little tea break. I'll see you on the other side.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. 1 hour down, haven't we had some fun? So much to talk about today. I was just having a little chit-chat with our Ted there. He sauntered into my side of the glass, giving me his what for about the demonstration in Trafalgar. I still maintain that, look, you know, at the very least, this was provocative. And you'd have to have zero emotional intelligence to not think that. Of course it was provocative. They knew what they were doing. It was a show. At the very least, it was a show saying it was, we're going to do what we like. You're just going to have to lump it. And if you dare say anything against it, well, you're a racist. You're an Islamophobe. You are the problem. But the point is this. That doesn't happen in Muslim countries. You don't have these big mass gatherings unless it's Mecca or something, with people in the middle of the street all praying together. They do it inside mosques in the same way that, yeah, and it's a huge difference between other cultural events that have taken place, like the Diwali celebrations, which, as I was saying to the previous caller, is more sort of music and dance and celebration. It isn't everyone getting down and shouting that, you know, there's only one God and it's Allah and, you know, Yabu sucks to the rest of you. And given especially what is going on in the world right now, it was a ridiculous decision. It was deliberately provocative. And frankly, I never want to see it happen again. But mark my words, it will. This isn't just one day. No. They will start doing, certain Muslim communities, what they've been doing in some of the banlieues of France for a long time. They will start taking their prayer mats out into the street. It will be taken over boroughs. This is just the beginning. It's not going to be a one-off, oh, well, once a year they all get together because it's the end of Ramadan, it's the start of Eid. No. What happens is, you know, they get a little bit more assertive, then a little bit more, then a little bit more. And the rest, unfortunately, is history. And history should have taught us some pretty stark lessons about what happens to a country that caves into Islamism. Shall we get the views of one of my absolute favourites, the brilliant former political editor of The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh? I think we should. Good morning, Trevor.
Good morning, Alex.
I have a feeling you might be sympathetic to my viewpoint that you're not particularly pro the mass prayer event that took place in Trafalgar. I am guessing, I could be wrong. Should it have been allowed to go ahead?
Could you hear me cheering from here as you were in your address there? Look, this was an act of passive aggression. It wasn't even assertiveness. This was a demonstration, a show of strength. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about peace at all. And as I keep saying, Islam doesn't mean peace as they try to pretend. It means submission. And they want us to submit. Now, this is, you don't need to wonder about the future and the crystal ball. You only need to look at what's happening right now in Australia, where only a few weeks ago you had 15 people slaughtered in a Muslim extremist atrocity with high-powered rifles near the beach on Bondi. And a few weeks later, there was a huge prayer meeting, very similar to the one in Trafalgar Square, in Martin Place in the centre of Sydney, a very famous address. And the police began to move these demonstrators, I think it's fair to call them, not observers at prayer. This was a demonstration. And they resisted, and they got their own back only a few hours ago when Prime Minister Anthony Albanese turned up at the mosque to mark the end of Ramadan in Lakemba, and they turned on him.
Yeah.
They turned on him big time and accused him of having blood on his hands for Australia's support for Israel in the Middle East. So this is what we can look forward to, Alex. It's not just a one-off. This is the beginning.
Oh, I agree. It is the beginning. So, I mean, look, someone who seems to have regrown his spine a little bit on this issue, because I think he was a little bit coy and nervous about addressing the Islam question a year ago, is Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. Let's have a little listen to what he said at a press conference in Scotland yesterday.
I've never seen Jewish services taking place in places of historic Christian worship or anywhere else. Look, we have to get this right. You know, we can't stop individuals praying. We wouldn't want to stop individuals praying. But mass prayer is banned. Mass Muslim prayer is banned in many Muslim countries in the Middle East itself. So, yes, we have to stop this kind of mass demonstration, provocative demonstration in historic British sites, because that's what it is.
I mean, it is a provocative demonstration, but what's concerning me, Trevor, at the moment, is politically, Islamism is massively on the march in the UK. They seem to have totally taken over the Green Party. The Green Party, in some instances, is polling second in the country. It is shown that it is capable of corralling a block vote and therefore getting MPs in. OK, so this time it's the woman with the mad hair and the dungarees, but next time, who is it going to be? Do you think that we really need, as a country, to start coming up with some policies that we can put in place to push back against this stuff?
We do indeed, and have done for a long time, but we aren't going to get them as long as Labour is in office, because they are enthralled to the Muslim votes on which they depend for quite a large number of constituencies across Britain. This is, as I say, this is not a prayer. It is a protest. It is a demonstration. And it is the only faith that we know of anywhere in the world which actually tries to use its religion in order to muscle its way into political areas of policy making and to actually manufacture an argument for banning any criticism of it in the process. Now, the laws about Islamophobia are absolutely disgraceful and a threat to the freedom of speech, but more than that, without freedom of speech, we do not have democracy, and that should not be allowed.
And the irony that they've essentially hijacked democracy in order to spread increasing pernicious influence. One thing that is very alarming as well, in my opinion, I want to get your thoughts on this, is it seems to me, looking at the reticence of not just the UK government, but Western European governments, doing anything in connection with Iran, making a big noise, a big song and dance. Oh, it's not us. Oh, no, this is America and Israel. No, we're not doing anything offensive. Iran knows exactly what they're doing. They've come out today saying we have a right to respond to Britain's aggression, saying that the UK's decision to allow US forces eventually to use military bases shows its participation in the war. It seems to me now that we have minority Islamism dictating our foreign policy.
I'm not sure that it's any longer dismissible as minority Muslims. Remember the poll only the other day showing that 39% of the population here, the adult population, support Iran. I mean, how can that possibly be for anyone who is educated enough to read a newspaper and discover what Iran does and has been doing for decades in bringing terror to the streets of countries across the world, including Britain? I mean, how can an educated, if they've been to the school at all, how can anyone, let alone 39%, say that they support Iran?
It's utterly staggering, and this goes so much deeper. It seems to be affecting all elements of policy in this country. Today we found out that asylum seekers who have been sent back to France as part of this one-in, one-out ridiculous policy have just been coming back via lorries. Again, our porous borders, people just taking the proverbial out of our ridiculously weak system. And I wonder to myself how many of these people coming over and setting up shop in the United Kingdom might be connected to Al-Qaeda or the Taliban or ISIS or sleeper cells for the IRGC.
I suspect a very large and significant proportion, Alex. And I think that you're not getting boatloads of people from Poland and Western or Eastern Europe, are you? You're not getting boatloads of Chinese or Americans or anyone from other than Muslim countries coming into this country. And really, I think that actually the past is sold. It's too late. We are already a ghettoized country. And the numbers, as we're seeing, all the statistics that I've just cited on polling, on the actual demonstration in Trafalgar Square, shows that we no longer have a kindly passive element of Muslims, of which I'm sure they are the majority. We have a very active and significant and angry and aggressive minority, and I think that they are wielding the whip the British or Anglicized Muslims will eventually follow the diktat of the imams in their mosques. They will not follow the views of the British Parliament, especially when they're at odds with them over issues like Gaza. I fear for the future, and I think that future is coming very quickly.
Do you know, I was saying the same just the other day. It's staggering to me how quickly we are now hurtling towards a Lebanon-style situation. We all sort of hope, those of us on our side of politics, that the next election will bring about a government that might be prepared to do something about this. But do you think it's actually too late now? Do you think that, you know, essentially 11th hours yesterday?
I hate to sound like a pessimist, but I'm afraid I am on this, because we now have several million Muslims in this country. We don't know exactly how many, because the authorities don't like to publish exact figures, especially on illegal immigrations, most of which are Muslim. But we have a very large number of Muslims in the country, many of whom, as you say, have come across on boats and are not in any way acclimatized to the way of life we've led in this country for decades, along with Muslim migrants who have become absorbed into the population and are very happy to be British. But I come back to Australia. Now, Australia is the country that everyone points to about the successful policies it has on assimilation. And everybody in Australia, in my experience, who goes to live there becomes Australian. They support the Australian flag, the Australian government, the Australian rules and the Australian laws, whether they're Chinese, Vietnamese, wherever they come from. They want to be Australian. The first thing they do is to learn English, Australian English, and they speak it with an Australian accent. And yet all of a sudden, and I was only there 2 years ago, and I know from people who are family friends, indeed Jewish family friends, that my views that I imported on that particular trip about what was happening in Britain and in London in particular were alien to them. They didn't see the threat that I was trying to describe of what's happening here in Britain. Well, they are now.
How worried are you about the Green Party? I'm bringing it back to them because this is where I think the most rapid acceleration is taking place. It's quite patently obvious, in my opinion, that party has been hijacked by Islamists who are loving the fact they get to, you know, hide behind a rainbow lanyard and pretend they're progressive and nice and they don't have unsavoury views and they're not anti-Semites and anti-West. And yet this party has the capability now, in just a matter of weeks, essentially, in the May elections, of actually taking over councils, and come the next general election, could potentially have, you know, tens of seats in our parliament.
Yes, and I think that Zach Polanski, the party's leader, is a very dangerous, unprincipled man who recklessly embraces any policy which will get him a vote, some of which completely contradict one another. Support for Muslims while at the same time supporting gender realignment and various other things, the support of gay rights, which is legitimate, but not in the terms of, not in the view of Islamists. I mean, these are anything, it's like the old Liberal Party. They would say one thing in one constituency and precisely the opposite in the neighbouring constituency in a by-election or a general election. And it works when the mood is blowing in the right direction, as it is right now. That 39% supporting Iran tells you a great deal about the way that the electorate here will suddenly go in the wrong direction, I think, and we'll be struggling. And I keep coming back to the other point that we have 2 or 3 more years of this government to run.
No, and that's terrifying because they're doing everything they can, it seems, to shackle us and gag us and prevent us even remotely speaking out on this subject. I mean, what should we be doing about this? Because this is the big question. You know, do we turn around and compromise some of our longly established and held attitudes towards freedoms in order to push back against what is potentially an existential threat? You know, are we going to have to, you know, hold our noses and have a political party that starts putting into practice policies that could seem very un-British?
Yes, but we're not going to get any other political party for another 2 or 3 years. And a lot of damage can be done in 2 or 3 years, as we've seen in just the 2 years nearly that this government has been in office. they are surrendering on every bit of ground where a threat to their chances of holding on to a seat is made. So in the Gorton by-election, they lost because of the Muslim vote. They are in terror of the Muslim vote. The Muslim vote is a terrorist weapon in its own right. And the problem is, Alex, I think that what we should have done 20 years ago is what we cannot do today. We should not have allowed multiculturalism to take root and establish ghettos in cities and towns across this country. But that would have required some sort of assertiveness on the part of the police. And I suspect when that time comes, if it comes, that the police decide to do what they did in Martin Place in Sydney a few weeks ago and actually move prayer meetings away from their prayer mats, I think we're going to have a real problem in this country. It's gone too far. They are not going to give ground.
No, I mean, this is it. We've gone way past preventing stuff. We're now in it, right, what the heck do we do about it to reverse it? And I just, you know, I don't know what the answer is, quite frankly. I'm not sure many political parties seem to know what the answer is, because there's so much, there is still so much taboo surrounding this subject. Let's have a little look now at poor old Sarah Pochin, the Reform UK MP, who found herself in the middle of a press conference without the aid of the auto cue. This is what happened.
My auto cue's frozen, and do you know what the funny thing is about my auto cue freezing is my chief of staff and David Ball will go into a complete panic, because once I start to ad-lib, the press have a field day. So we were talking about the Reform tartan then, weren't we, whilst I'm just waiting for my auto cue. And I really wanted to come on in a Reform tartan burqa, but it apparently one of these events that aren't live streamed, and we'll do it. We'll do all the naughty stuff, we'll do all the bits that have gone wrong and all the effing and jeffing when we do our pieces to camera and all the rest. It'd be hilarious.
Looks like she's standing in front of the Great Pyramid. Maybe a burqa would have been quite apt. Poor old Sarah. Random comment there. But, I mean, does it actually show on some level, though, because there hasn't been a big hoo-ha about the fact that she said that perhaps we are growing up a bit, that the oft over-quoted Overton window is indeed shifting?
I would like to think so, but I seriously think it may not shift enough or soon enough, and nor will it actually affect the sort of policies that this government, if it wanted to, could still introduce, which would begin to tackle this problem. I mean, that was a funny joke. I thought it was an amusing performance. Why would it anger anybody? Why are people saying that it was disrespectful to the Muslim faith, in which does not actually call for the burqa to be worn? It doesn't call for the veil. It says people should be modest, women should be modest. It doesn't say anything about covering their face or their flesh. It's absurd. And this country, and its Labour Party in particular, but everybody with common sense who feels supportive of women's rights, should surely be opposing everything that the Muslim faith and its Sharia law advocates in terms of polygamy, in terms of hate crime, in terms of the treatment of women in the family, the disrespect to there are a whole range of things which are prescribed by Muslims in this country under the Sharia law cover. And that should be opposed by every right-thinking man and woman in this country. But it's not. We actually bring in laws which forbid us from criticising it.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I really don't know what the answer is anymore, Trevor. I really don't. Waiting to see what Reform say they're going to do. Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun, thank you ever so much. Always a privilege catching up with Trevor. I mean, when I think about it, I mean, look at all the stories that have happened recently. You had that crazy advice to teachers in the north of England saying, well, you know, maybe kids shouldn't be allowed to draw cartoons and have music and dance lessons. Might offend Muslims. What Muslims? Like, last time I was in Marrakesh, I went to a restaurant, they had belly dancers. You know, that's Taliban. That is extremism. That's not normal Islam. If anyone's offended by cartoons and songs and dance, they need their blimmin' heads checked. Then, of course, we saw what happened with the West Midlands police, the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, when it all came out that basically the community leaders had said, well, you know, if those fans come over, they might get roughed up by our boys who keep weapons in the mosque. And the police said, well, we can't have those fans. They're the hooligans. What on earth is going on? I now swear blind that this government's approach to Iran is being dictated by Islamists, basically dictated by Iran indirectly. We're hurtling towards such a dangerous situation. In fact, we're in the dangerous situation. We're in the dangerous situation. And, you know, what I want to hear now, and what we need to hear now, is what on earth is going to be done about it? Who's going to stand up and say things that might be very unpopular, but, you know, what the approach is going to be to try and reverse some of this stuff, if indeed we can. Right, what are your thoughts on this? 0344499 1000 is the number to call. I really want to chat with some of you guys after the break. Also, you can send a WhatsApp to me on that number or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send a text like the word talk before you type out your message. I will see you in a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Shall we do some messages and then take some calls? Tracy in Chingford says, I'm absolutely sick of Muslims being allowed to pray in our streets, let alone our monuments, yet I've seen numerous Christian preachers being arrested for inciting hatred. Just like the Muslims praying, our country is on its knees. Hi, Alex, can you explain the left suddenly screaming, hands off Iran, when they completely ignored the innocent people of Iran that opposed the barbaric regime being slaughtered in the streets? It's mad, isn't it? It's utterly crazy. Regarding Zach Polanski, says Dave in Hull, it wouldn't surprise me once the Muslim community has got a foothold in the Greens that Zach will be removed as leader and replaced by Deputy Leader Mohsin Ali, giving the Muslims their own party. Well, quite. Yes. That is going to be what happens. You know, if you want to look at interesting history on this, you only have to look at Iran itself. And the Islamists joined forces with the communists back during the revolution in the 70s. Then as soon as they got into power, they slaughtered all the communists. What do you think the chances are that Keir Stalin tries to put us into lockdown for this meningitis outbreak? Jan the man from Blackburn. I don't think that's going to happen because in terms of transmission, you basically got to snog someone to get it. So I think, thankfully, we're not all going to be locked down. But it is alarming. And the bigger question to ask is how did this particularly stringent strain of meningitis get to this country in the first place? Doesn't just come out of the sky, does it? Where did it come from? I wonder. There's something called the meningitis belt across the middle of Africa. I wonder, given that this started off in Kent, whether some of our new arrivals might have had something to do with it. I currently live in Morocco and love the culture here. I find the daily call to prayer quite soothing because it is so part of life here. However, when I'm home in Lancashire, I find it very intimidating to hear the call to prayer blasting out across Morrison's car park. Do you know what? I was discussing this with someone the other day. The call to prayer in Morocco is one of the best calls to prayer because in other countries, you know, I was in Egypt recently, the imams start piping up and they do their little bit, you know, well. In Morocco, it's like they compete. They all start going and they sort of build up and it all goes off. The whole night air is filled with the call to prayer. And there is something really atmospheric about it. But you wouldn't see a load of Muslims getting out their prayer mats in the middle of the streets. In fact, when you walk around the souks of Marrakesh, and it is prayer time, people discreetly go into the backs of their shops with their mats and get out of the way because it's a sort of private thing they're doing. Anyone who says that this sort of, you know, mass prayer in Trafalgar Square wasn't a two fingers up at the establishment, I think, you know, come on. Of course it was. The Trafalgar Square stunt was a PR exercise. Yes, exactly, Susan. And a message to the global Muslim communities. We have conquered the UK. Come and join us. No, I think you're right on that one. Khan knew exactly what he was doing. Yes, he did. It was provocative and it's made me feel hostile towards Muslims. This is the point, isn't it? You know, because there are plenty of people who live peaceably in society who may follow that faith and don't mean any of us harm. And all of this stuff, because it's provocative, ends up creating the very Islamophobia that they are trying to legislate against. Susan goes on to say, I have a very rational fear, and I'm definitely hostile to a religion that suppresses women as first cousin marriage, FGM, honour killings, and one that wants to control me and the rest of the world. In fact, I get more hostile to these proselytisers every day. Well, quite. We have to stop thinking of Islam as a religion. It's a political project masquerading as a religion. It is a political religious sect based upon violence, subjugation and control, and it has to be prescribed, says Mike in Sussex. Can you prescribe an entire religion? I don't know. But there is a big difference, OK, between Islam and all the other world religions, which is all the other world religions are belief systems, personal belief systems. Islam at its core has a sort of campaigning element to it, which is, where they want to... There are verses in the Quran which are basically saying, you know, punish the infidel and spread Islam far and wide. And, you know, it depends how aggressive one is in that approach. Right, let's take some calls. Let's speak to Mandy, who's in Worcester. Good morning, Mandy. How are you?
Good morning, Alex. How are you?
I'm all right. Slightly jaded and tired today, but surviving.
Hang on in there.
Right, what's on your mind, Mandy?
Well, obviously, I've been listening to a lot of the people who've been ringing in and messaging in, and I agree with the majority of them. There was one man I didn't quite agree with, but there you go. About really this, it's a mission creep. That's what I think it is. It is like a mission creep. It's slowly, you know, catchy monkey, or they used that saying or whatever it was. You know, it starts off slow and with this Islam. It is like an Islamic invasion taking over our country. I don't know where we're going.
Oh, I know where we're going.
Well,
that's the problem.
But
you know,
I don't want to know where we're going.
Oh.
But it's very concerning. And I mean, I've got a major issue at the moment, Alex, to be honest, as well as all this other stuff of the praying and, you know, all that stuff that went on in Trafalgar Square. And obviously the Al-Quds thing was it last Sunday? Or
Yeah, I went to that. Shocking.
That was shocking. I mean, and the police just stood and watched it.
I know. I think we're in a whole world of pain now, and you know, this whole idea of where we're going. I think we're already there, and it's happening so quickly now, so quickly.
It does seem to have speeded up, and
hugely.
I mean, I think there was about 11 arrests or something from last weekend. I mean, there was a fair few hundred people there, and I mean, it was vile what they were chanting, absolutely vile. What I saw, I mean, it was literally declaring death to us.
It was deeply disturbing to see it up close. I
mean, I wasn't there, but I saw on you know, on TV and stuff, it looked dreadful.
Well, it wasn't exactly a happy family day out, put it that way. Mandy, thank you so much for your call, my darling. I've got to let you go because we've got to advertise some products so someone can pay my wage. So have a look at these items that you may or may not wish to purchase at some point in your life, and I'll see you very shortly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You know, when I was at university, we spent a lot of time down the pub, sometimes in lecture halls and tutorials, but I can't remember there being madness on the campus. In fact, it'd been the American elections where George Bush became president, and there was one sort of slightly hysterical American girl running around going, hug me, I'm a Democrat. And that was about it. In the whole of the 3 years I was studying, that was kind of the only leftist protest, if you will, that I ever saw. What on earth has happened today? You go to university, you got all these mad lunatics trying to shut down free speech, banging on about Palestine, Gaza, the trans stuff. That seems to be at the sharpest end of the lot of it. Well, someone who knows about this thing is Samiksha Bhattacharjee, who is president of University College London's Libertarian Society. Tell me, what went on?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm the president of the UCL Libertarian Society. We decided to host an event talking about, well, free speech, essentially. And it was centred around biological sex, about the transgender whole debate. And, yeah, absolute chaos basically ensued because people on campus essentially did not want to hear the other side. I mean, we invited everybody, even those who oppose, we invited Connie Shaw, who's a gender-critical speaker, to come over. And, well, clearly their points aren't good enough. So they decided to instead try to infiltrate our event, protest outside, try to get our event shut down, essentially.
I mean, how many are there when people come along and sort of, you know, set up all these protests? Are we talking about an especially gobby group of 10 people, or does it actually amount to loads?
Well, I actually think that the vast majority of people on campus do actually want open debate and discussion, but they're a very silent majority. Most people don't want to speak out. So the loudest voices on campus are those who oppose you, and those are like, I mean, you said 10 people. It wasn't 10 people. It was a good, 50 people. But there's especially more kind of in the comment section saying that by hosting this event, I'm essentially creating an opportunity for violence and oppression against certain individuals and minority groups. And absolutely, yeah, I mean, Connie herself, she faced very horrific threats of a sexual nature.
Really?
Yeah.
Did the police have to get involved?
We didn't get the police involved. The police was present at the protest. We're looking into our options when it comes to that, because obviously the threats that we got were absolutely horrific.
What I don't understand, right, is UCL is not some sort of Mickey Mouse university. This is a fine establishment where you need a brain cell or two if you're going to be admitted to study there. So how is it that a university like UCL has people amongst their number who believe this mad stuff, who talk about violence and oppression when it comes to free speech, and, believe that, well, frankly, a man can become a woman? It is clearly impossible. I don't understand for the life of me how, reasoned individuals with academic prowess are sucked into all of this chaos.
Yeah, I don't really understand either. I mean, like you said, UCL is the 9th best university in the world, and university is supposed to be a training ground to be able to, go into the real world. This is your first step probably away from home, where you're being exposed to all of these ideas and you want to be able to debate and discuss. University was a beacon of free speech and freedom of expression and debating and discussing. I mean, that's why I went to university. I'm paying 10k a year so that I can be exposed to these ideas. I'm doing history, politics and economics. So I'm essentially meant to be learning about all these thinkers, but essentially what I'm getting is a masterclass in Marxist critiques and groupthink.
Is that sort of in the lectures as well? That sort of sense of leftism and Marxism, does that permeate into the lecture halls?
Yeah, I mean, it does, because a lot of the time you don't hear about thinkers like Friedrich Hayek, you don't hear about Thomas Sowell, you hear about, even if it isn't as left-wing, it's usually Keynesian economics. It's kind of like, that is the base, and then everything else from there, which is, really upsetting, especially as a classical liberal, when these ideas are kind of completely dismissed and people are coming out of university with only a very narrow set of understanding of economics or of politics, and they're going into the workplace, they're going into, law or journalism or whatever, with this idea that I will only be friends with those who agree with me, and they don't have any way of actually being able to handle people who don't agree with them. Their solution to anything is essentially to shut it down. And I've lost countless friends. It's genuinely upsetting for standing up for freedom of speech at university.
Oh, I tell you what, you get used to it, and then you get to my age and you suddenly realise you've got no left-wing friends because they've all abandoned you, and it's quite a blessing, to be honest. It's like, bye then, watch the door on the way out. but talk to me about the other students there, because you said there's sort of largely a silent majority. I'm still quite hopeful that, like you said, what we have is a very vocal minority of, people who've gone wonky for whatever reason. They've been brainwashed into believing all this stuff, who think it's their job to go out, 'cause they're probably narcissists, quite frankly, to go out and make a big song and dance and have this performative protest. But I'm still sort of hopeful that the majority of younger people are of the sane ilk. Is that a hope in vain?
I think it's very good to keep hope. I mean, there's people like me, there are people who, when I'm out and about, there are people who come up to me and say, thank you so much for speaking what we're all thinking about. Thank you for creating this space at university for people to have this opportunity to meet different people. And yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, we had our union president who essentially said that the only reason why our event wasn't able to be shut down was because of the law, the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act. We shouldn't have to have a law telling us that free speech is the only thing stopping university from becoming a very expensive echo chamber, essentially. So it is more of a cultural shift. We definitely need a cultural shift. People are afraid, people are scared, because if they speak up against the orthodoxy on campus, they're going to be shunned by their friends. You know, they're going to, graduate employers might not even take them if they, oppose diversity, equity and inclusion mandates, for example, or even the trans stuff. So people are scared, people are afraid, and what I want to do and what people like me want to do is to challenge that orthodoxy on campus, is to ensure that people are able to meet people who don't agree with them or who do agree with them, because we need that shift on campus. And I'm very hopeful for our generation. We are the next generation, and there is definitely a shift amongst my generation. Just generally, people are waking up to common sense arguments. People are thinking, I mean, you had obviously the generation above mine, the millennials, you had this kind of millennial socialism. You did have that kind of protest vibe on campus. But now it is shifting. The numbers are dwindling when it comes to their protests.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Did they give you a hard time since sort of, leading the debate in all of this stuff? Do you get people coming up and openly attacking you on campus?
I have had people verbally abusing me, yes. And I mean, what you need to do is find people who do agree with you initially, so that you do have those people that you can talk to. And there are plenty of people who are willing to talk about these issues with their friends, but they don't want to, shout about it on campus due to seeing what I'm going through, and they're saying, I feel really bad for you. I don't want to have to go through that.
Have you ever had a moment where you just think that it ain't worth it?
Sometimes I have, especially when I've lost friends. I mean, I lost one of the closest friends that I've known her for over a decade, and she's just cut me off.
But then who does that? If they're an actual friend, they wouldn't do that, though. Because it's this thing, rightists never do that to leftists.
I know,
rightists
I would
are never
never.
like, I'm not going to be friends with you anymore because you like the Green Party. I find them curious. I think they're deranged, but happy to have them among my cohort. But like I said, because they're so allergic to us, I seem to have shed them all anyway.
100%. I would never dream of doing that. I want to have friends who think differently to me. I think it's good to have friends who think differently to you, so that you can actually understand their arguments, and so that you can actually, empathize with them, not necessarily agreeing with them. And I think it's good for them also to be exposed to my ideas, because people on the left, they generally think people on the right are frankly evil.
I know. We just think they're a bit unhinged. They think we're the spawn of the devil. Samiksha, thank you ever so much, and thank you for coming into the studio. I think you're going to have a very good career ahead of you.
Thank you.
So keep up the good work. Right, we're going to be taking a break. If you want to comment on anything, then, crack on. 03444 99 1000 is the number to send me a WhatsApp, or you can leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. You can also use that number to call up the lovely Kieran, who's poised at the blower, ready to take down your details and give you a call back the next time we have our phone in section. 8722 is the number if you'd like to send a text message. If you are going to do that, write the word talk before you send your message. Everything is your normal network rates and basically don't cost you anything. It's not like we're, fleecing you of your hard-earned cash. So what are you waiting for? Roll up, roll up. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And as a democratic station, we want to hear your voice as well. Right, we're taking a short break now. When we come back, we're going to be poking under the bonnet of where our hard-earned taxpayers' cash is going, as it turns out for the first time that the amount we're paying out in welfare now outstrips the amount the Treasury is collecting from taxpayers. That is not sustainable. And we're also going to be discussing the fact that £6 billion of British taxpayers' money is being sent overseas on green schemes. Oh, great, yay, let's all save the planet, shall we? Kumbaya and all of that. We're going to be joined by Darwin Friend, Research Director of the Taxpayers Alliance, just after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Cal, surprise, the Greens have waded into this whole debate about whether this mass call to prayer should have taken place in Trafalgar Square. And they say it was wonderful. Of course they love it. Zach Polanski, Mohsin Ali and Rachel Millward have sent a statement saying, "We stand in solidarity with those from our religious communities increasingly under attack and firmly in defence of religious freedom, peaceful public gathering and the right of all communities to express their beliefs openly and without fear. Recent comments from Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch regarding public prayer by Muslim communities risks not only inflaming division and misrepresenting the nature of peaceful religious expression, but also undermining the very freedoms that form the foundation of a democratic and pluralistic society." Oh, and it goes on. Words matter, he says, and they can either build bridges or deepen divides. We choose to use ours to build bridges. No, mate. A mass call to prayer in the centre of our capital city of a nominally Christian nation is the thing that creates the division. That is clearly provocative. Everyone knows it's provocative. In the same way that if I, went on over to, I don't know, Jordan or something and started, having massive nativity festivals, and they probably wouldn't mind, to be honest. But, it's so obviously audacious at the very least. So there you go. But you would expect, wouldn't you, the Green Party to support it and use every opportunity to put out a sort of statement like that. Right, your thoughts on the things we're talking about today? 03444991000 is the number if you want to give me a call or send me a WhatsApp, 87222 if you'd like to send me a text like Talk Before You Text. Right, let us talk now about how our hard-earned cash money is being spent unwisely because Yvette Cooper's revealed £6 billion has been spent on green schemes overseas despite major cuts to the foreign aid budget. We're joined now by Darwin Friend, Research Director at the Taxpayers Alliance. I used to be, Darwin, somewhat in favour of foreign aid because I thought it's a great tool of soft diplomacy. But why on earth? Like green projects? It's frankly ludicrous.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Alex, for having me on the show. I completely agree with you. And what we're seeing is £6 billion spent over 3 years on what they're terming international climate finance projects. And they're suggesting that this is going to generate £6.7 billion in what they termed UK-backed climate and nature positive investments, whatever that means. But you're quite right, Alex. I think when people think, your viewers, everyone across the country thinks about overseas aid, what they're thinking about is genuine humanitarian support in crises, not these dreamt up ideas by our politicians, which are fundamentally ideological and have very little to do with supporting those who are in some of the poorest countries across the world.
I mean, looking at some of the things that money is being spent on, encouraging families in Africa to cook with electricity instead of firewood. Let them get on. They want to cook on firewood. They can do it. A £4.5 million project to help the environment. Thousands of villages in Malawi are given £433 in cash. How is that going to change blimmin' climate change? I don't understand who sits there and comes up with this craziness.
That's the thing. And the thing is that we're giving out hundreds of millions of pounds of our money, billions of pounds of our hard-working taxpayers' money. And we're not actually seeing, A, what it's for, and B, what people are actually getting in return for it. And I welcomed, actually, when, like you, I thought international aid, that could be a positive thing when it's helping people in genuine need. But then when the government decided to reduce the amount they were giving in international aid, I personally supported that claim because that money, as they said, could be better used supporting our defence systems instead. But when we're thinking about £6 billion on these climate projects, which seem to have very tenuous achievements as a result of them, then what we could actually be spending that £6 billion on instead, for example, is that's the cost of the 2 aircraft carriers that we built recently. That would be the amount we need to double the size of the destroyers that we have in our entire neighbour. We could turn it from 6 to 12 with that money instead. And so I think when the government's using our taxpayers' money, what they constantly have to be calling back to is, A, what's it actually for? Not these grand schemes that they come up with in closeted rooms. What is it actually going to be used for? And B, could it be used on something better? And I think in the case of this money, it definitely could.
I just think we'd be far better off building factories and stuff and trading with poorer countries a lot better than we do. That way you build sort of, you know, entrenched bilateral ties, because when it comes down to money, money talks at the end of the day. And if you've got good trading relationships with a country, they end up being on your side a little bit more than not. Let's talk now about welfare. Because astonishing from, I was going to say your old boss, I don't know if you shared a tenure, but Matthew Elliott, who once upon a time was the boss of the Taxpayers Alliance, did a great speech in the Lords talking about how now, I think for the very first time, the amount we're paying out in welfare is more than the amount we're getting from taxpayers themselves. I mean, that is just ridiculous. That cannot be sustainable.
Yeah, well, he's absolutely right as well. The statistics show we're spending around about £330 billion on welfare, just over $300 billion we raise in income taxes in return for that. And so, as he said, we are actually giving out more money for people who aren't necessarily in work. Then we're actually getting in from those people who are actually getting up every day, going out and doing a hard day's work in return. And it's these hypocrisies that we see across the entire system. We also saw today, Alex, from the Office for National Statistics in the public sector finances, that the UK in February, the UK government borrowed £14 billion and we had debt interest of £13 billion. So almost everything we're borrowing right now is just to be spent on paying the debt interest of what previous politicians had borrowed in the past as well. Like I said, you see this all the time from our government. And what we actually need to do is start having a more transparent, fairer system where actually we're treating taxpayers fairly and we're not overtaxing them. And yes, we're providing support to those that genuinely need it in the welfare system, but we're also encouraging those that can work to get back into work by creating jobs and creating an environment that is friendly and simple for them.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. There needs to be more of a very clear deterrent about not working, i.e. you don't work and guess what? You can't afford to buy anything. Unfortunately, it seems that people who are on welfare and benefits seem to make more at the end of the month than those people who are actually going to the office. Darwin, thank you ever so much for coming on the show. Should we do a call now? Let's speak to Trevor, who is in Hampshire. Hello there, Trevor.
Hi, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm all right, not bad. How are you? How's lovely Hampshire?
Oh, it's wonderful. I should say Eid Mubarak to you, of course, you know, being as we're all going that way.
Oh, yeah, you could tell I'm a huge advocate of Mohammed.
Absolutely. Yeah, one point I wanted to make was, you know, seeing all those people beating their heads against the floor in Trafalgar Square, the noticeable thing is they actually exclude women totally from it. Yeah, so even if you wanted to do it, you couldn't.
Well, exactly. No, this is it. It's one of the many ironies when it comes to the Muslim faith and its sort of wholesale adoption and celebration by the so-called progressives. The fact that they just managed to gloss over segregation when it comes to the way that the different sexes are treated. Do you think there's a political party out there, Trevor, who's going to actually deal with this?
Well, I hope so. I've sort of hung my hopes on reform, actually, but let's see.
Yeah, what do you make of Nigel Farage's comments lately? It seems like he's sort of got his mojo back a little bit more when it comes to right-wingery and being ahead of the narrative and being brave.
Well, I think he's got to. Someone's got to step up to the mark because we're not going to get it from that cowardly guy that's running the country. Well, not running the country, is he? He's just he's a figurehead of disgrace, I think.
I love that. He's a figurehead of disgrace. Trevor, thank you ever so much. Lovely to hear from you. Let's do a couple of messages before we take our little break and enter the last hour of the programme. I feel like I'm in a nightmare, says Lisa from Manchester, where you're screaming but nothing's coming out of your mouth. I'm terrified of this Islamic takeover. Why the hell isn't it being stopped? No, I kind of agree with you there. It does feel like we're just sort of screaming into a void. And not only that, those of us who do scream or say anything are going to end up probably on the wrong side of the law. I've been wondering, actually, when this sort of, the definition of anti-Muslim hostility, when that comes into play, is that actually going to affect me? We have to have some sort of meeting out there where I'm sat down and said, well, you can no longer say the things you normally say about Islam. You're going to get into big trouble if you do. I'll let you know. Foreign aid taken from poor people in rich countries to give to rich people in poor countries, says Derek. Yep, Pretty much. Hi, Alex. Why don't you show how women dressed in Iraq before Islam took over? It's amazing. You look at things like 1950s, 1960s, Afghanistan, Iran. They were all there in mini skirts, garden parties, cocktails. It looks like a right old laugh. Not so much today. And this is the warning, isn't it? How quickly this stuff sets in if it's not attended to. Right, as promised, we are going to take a very short break now, but don't go anywhere, because coming up on the other side of the break, we're going to be discussing all of the inviting in the Labour Party, whether it's going to be curtains for Starmer, just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back to the show. Lots of messages coming in today. A lot of you very worried about the direction of travel when it comes to this country in regards to a far more assertive form of Islam that appears to be taking root in the United Kingdom. A brilliant message, actually, from Sarah in Morden. I just want to read this one out because it's really good. Islam is converting this atheist, says Sarah. I have just had 2 ladies knock on my door to give me a leaflet inviting me to a memorial of Jesus' death. Yeah, otherwise known as Easter. Usually I politely advise that I'm an atheist and decline the leaflets, but today I took it off them, looked it over and said, thank you, that's very kind. If I'm picking sides, I'm going Christianity. A close friend has also started going to church. Islam is doing the work of the C of E recruitment for them. Always an upside. Do you know, I think it's true. There is a massive upswing in people beginning to go to church, and I actually do think it is as a direct result of other religions that seem to be, well, Islam, basically, not other religions, which seems to be, as I said, becoming more and more assertive in the United Kingdom. Is that something that we really ought to be concerned about? Let's kick off with that question, shall we? To Carl Turner, MP, who's a Labour MP for Hull East. Good afternoon, Carl. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Because it's a big talking point today, let's kick off with that. Comments from Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage against this sort of mass prayer, which took place in Trafalgar Square, following the comments from Nick Timothy, of course, who said it's an act of domination. And Kemi Badenoch's accused Keir Starmer of sucking up to Muslims. Is she right?
Well, look, I'm not a fan of bashing any sort of religious or faith group as it happens, and I disagreed with what Nick Timothy had to say. But what I would say is Nick Timothy was entitled to say what he thinks, and I don't think we should be trying to police the thoughts or views publicly or otherwise of anybody, frankly. If it amounts to criminality, that's a very different thing, but I don't think it did. Should he resign as the Shadow Secretary of State for Justice? Probably not, really. I think we're making too much of this, frankly, and I think it's a deflection, if I'm being honest, from our own feelings. That's the reality. We're doing some stuff which is not popular. I can name a lot of policy areas that I'm concerned about. We've got the General Secretary of Unite out saying, what on earth is Labour doing in terms of various areas of policy, not least the bin dispute in Birmingham, which is seeing huge piles of domestic waste in the streets. And there's other areas that not just trade union leaders are worried about, but Labour MPs as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Unite boss has warned Labour will be decimated at May's elections. That seems quite likely to happen, but particularly it seems at the hands of the Green Party. Is there a concern here that the Labour Party might try and move to cover off that electoral threat, and in doing so start adopting more radical left-wing policies?
Well, that's the suggestion, isn't it, Alex? This sort of, it's very difficult for the Labour Party to govern from the centre ground when you've got Reform on the very right and the Greens on what is clearly the left of the Labour Party. We can't possibly please everybody. So we are in difficulty in terms of the electorate. And I think what we've got to do is just do what we promised to do in the manifesto, which is effectively what Angela Rayner was speaking to a couple of days ago. She's not been terribly radical. I'm disappointed, frankly, that Harriet Harman has criticised Angie Rayner. Why? Because, Harriet is a very popular figure in the Parliamentary Labour Party. She is very well respected, but Harriet has the good fortune of not having to face the electorate. She's a member of the House of Lords. She's not me or anybody else, Angie Rayner et al., who are looking at the polling, knowing for a fact that come the next election, if things don't improve in terms of the leadership of the party, we are out of a job. That's where we're going.
I mean, do you think that there's going to be a coup, so to speak, after those anticipated dreadful results happen in May? Do you think Rayner is ready to make a move? All sorts of people saying, well, she's earning a bob or two. Hopefully Inland Revenue will clear her of the allegations of inappropriate or not paying tax on a second home. Do you think that she's shaping up to try and seize control?
Well, look, I hope there's not going to be a challenge on Keir Starmer, actually, but I do think Keir Starmer needs to improve dramatically. I think where we are in terms of international policy, and I think him not being rushing headlong into a war in Iran was probably the right thing. I think that's what the mood of the public is at the minute. And we're now seeing the consequences of what Trump did there, because we can't get vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. That is going to be a problem in the economy. So I think the Prime Minister was right there.
Is Ed Miliband, in terms of this problem in the economy, surely the best way to fend this off is if Ed Miliband just gives it a rest with his net zero zealotry and actually goes, do you know what? We're having to buy oil and gas from Norway, from the North Sea. We can get our own out. Do you think he's flexible enough that he might actually look at that as an option?
Well, I think Ed Miliband should be looking at licences in the North Sea for exploration. I think that's absolutely a reasonable thing to do. We need mixed energy in the economy, and I think relying too much on other forms is probably a mistake, especially at this moment in time. But that's an argument for Ed Miliband to defend, and I'm sure he'll do his very best. But we are buying oil from other parts of the European Union, and some of which is from the North Sea. It seems a bit balmy to me.
Oh, it seems very balmy to me. But what sort of, if Rayner does sort of seize the moment, if Labour MPs after those May elections suddenly go, you know, it's not sustainable, we're hemorrhaging support, we've got to have a change at the top, and it does end up being Angela Rayner, what sort of a Prime Minister would she be? I mean, what are her policies? What makes her different to Sir Keir Starmer? Is she more left-wing?
Well, I think the first thing is Angela Rayner doesn't say to me, and I'm a friend of hers, that she's keen on ousting the PM. She's saying the very opposite. She's saying she wants him to improve. She's not suggesting for a second that she's on manoeuvres, certainly not to MP colleagues. But what is happening, this is the truth, and I'm being honest, people are going to Angela Rayner and saying, look, we are in a terrible state. What can you do to help? And what do we do if after May the election results are an absolute catastrophic disaster? What can we do to improve things? And Rayner is speaking to that issue. The reality is we ought to be winning in Scotland in May. Anas Sarwar is an extremely good leader. His politics is fairly moderate. He's not on the mad left or the mad right of the Labour Party. He's very much in the centre ground. He is a capable politician. And we've had 19 years of the SNP, which has been a failed Scottish government. So it's terribly disappointing that we're now apparently in third place in Scotland. And Anas is right to say, thanks very much indeed, Keir Starmer, but please don't come anywhere near Scotland because you're just not popular here. That is the problem.
It's a big worry, actually, going to be more Wales, quite frankly, because that's been a sort of one-party state ever since the creation of the Welsh Assembly. Frankly speaking, it's been ever since the creation of the Labour Party. But it looks like you're going to get beat and beat big in Wales.
Well, it's a massive problem, Alex. That's the reality. Look, let me just give you an example about that. You've got Plaid Cymru looking to be the government in Wales in not too many weeks from now. And in central government, in Westminster, you've got the Prime Minister and the Justice Secretary, the Deputy Prime Minister, forcing Welsh MPs through the division lobby to support the most balmy policy that any government of any political colour could have ever mustered on jury curtailment. Welsh courts don't have a problem. Wales MPs don't have a problem with backlog in the criminal courts there, but the Westminster Parliament, led by Keir Starmer, is forcing those Welsh MPs to vote to bring in a policy which is going to do away with some jury trials in Wales. It's appalling. Plaid Cymru must be thinking, how on earth can we be this lucky? It's balmy.
Let's talk about Starmer. Do you think he's weak? I always get the impression, I'm not inside the Labour Party, so I'm not privy to how things might operate, but from an outsider looking in, I get the impression that Lord Hermer has a huge amount of influence and potentially behind the scenes, he's secretly the one actually running the show. Do you think that's a founded suspicion?
Well, if Lord Hermer was running the show, bear in mind I was his parliamentary private secretary for 6 months after the general election. If Lord Hermer is running the show, he's not doing very well at running the show because I spent more than an hour with Richard Hermer trying to persuade him that this jury trial curtailment was a balmy idea. I think if I'm honest with you, he probably agrees with me. But if he went away and made representations to the PM on the point, he didn't get very far because we're still ploughing on with a balmy policy.
So actually, because I'm always under the impression that perhaps Hermer's actually more influential, but you sort of seem to suggest that might not be the case.
I think Keir Starmer is very much his own man. I know him well. I mean, that is the truth. Keir Starmer has a phrase which is, I'm not going to do this in committee. What he means is, I'm going to make my own decision on this. The problem that Keir Starmer's had, and bear in mind he's a friend of mine, I still text, is, I'm not happy with a particular policy, but we text one another. We're in sort of a decent place, really, in terms of our friendship. But the reality is, Keir Starmer outsources very important decisions to others. That's the truth. Political decisions are outsourced. We've got this Mandelson appointment fiasco. Well, how on earth can you imagine the protege of Mandelson interviewing Mandelson about whether or not he should be the US ambassador and then outsourcing the same thing to another individual who, in fact, is another pal of Mandelson, Mr. Doyle, who's now in the House of Lords? It's balmy. Keir Starmer, my criticism is he outsources important decisions. The PLP have lost confidence to a fairly large degree. That's just the truth. I don't think there's going to be a challenge next week, but if the election results are catastrophic, then there might be a challenge. I've said publicly a couple of days ago, I think it's inevitable now that there will be a challenge unless he changes his direction for the Labour Party and the country.
But this is the thing, which direction should he go in? Because should he sort of stand there, look at the situation in the country and say, this is, you know, the best sort of policies for the situation we've got to deal with, even if it ends up being unpopular, i.e., well, look, you know, the economy is on the brink of disaster. We've just found out we pay more out in welfare than we get from taxpayers. Gonna have to get that bill cut, however much it upsets backbenchers. You know, is he going to look at things and say, look, you know, we've got to sort out immigration, it's the #1 doorstep issue, however much it upsets backbenchers? Or looking at what potentially are going to be disastrous election results, is he going to look at that and go, we're going to have to try and win back those voters that we've lost to the Green Party and start echoing some of those more extreme left-wing viewpoints? Or is he going to think, well, you know, actually maybe Morgan McSweeney had the right idea of still trying to court the votes of the Red Wall?
Morgan McSweeney didn't have any right ideas. It was a disaster. And this idea that Morgan McSweeney won the 24 general election is just a nonsense. I'll tell you who won it, Liz Truss and Boris Johnson. People were absolutely fed up of the previous chaos of a Tory government that had lasted for 14 years. 14 years too long. Keir Starmer didn't win the election, but Keir Starmer provided some credibility to the nation that he could go in and do a competent job. Sadly, we get into government, and within minutes of doing that, we start picking on pensioners on winter fuel. That was a mistake. We then carry on doing daft things that were never mentioned in the manifesto. Here we are 18 months, nearly 2 years into a parliament, and we're now doing juries. Never mentioned again. Not in the manifesto. What on earth are we doing?
Where's this stuff coming from then? If it's not in the manifesto, who's coming up with these policies?
Well, in terms of jury curtailment, every single Lord Chancellor for the last 3 decades has been asked to do it. I'm afraid to say David Lammy is the fool who's fallen for the trick. That's the reality. I've had a letter from the former Lord Chancellor, Robert Buckland, which asked me to share with every MP in Parliament, saying, I was asked to do this. I resisted because it was a daft idea.
So this is coming from the civil service, essentially?
I think a lot of it is, because there's no direction. That's the problem. So why don't we stick to the manifesto, which is essentially what Rayner was saying a few days ago, deliver what we've said we'll deliver, go to the country in 29 and say, do you feel any better off? If you do, vote Labour. If you don't feel better off, kick us out. That's the reality, because that's how people vote, Alex.
What about the B word, the good old Brexit word? Because, you know, there's been a lot of noises recently coming out of the Labour Party from people saying, you know, people like the Chancellor saying, well, you know, I think we should get back in there. Oh, maybe we should be part of the single market and the customs union. Certainly, we've committed ourselves to dynamic alignment with food rules and net zero. That, to me, I think is the craziest part. We're going to have to make contributions to cohesion funds. But of course, you know, in terms of more access to the EU, these things always come at a price. And what the EU is trying to push now is the youth mobility programme, which is basically freedom of movement by another name, isn't it? I mean, do you think that's the right approach to take? Do we need to be... I mean, obviously, I've got my opinions on this. Everyone knows I was a Brexit Party MEP. But do you think that we should be opening that Pandora's box again?
Well, look, Alex, you and I are not going to agree on this. 74% of my electorate was in your camp. 74% of the people of East Hull voted to leave the European Union. So I've always been against what my electorate have thought on this issue. I think it was an unmitigated disaster to leave the European Union, the single market and the customs union. I think it's damaged business. Do I think it would be the answer to our prayers if we got back in right now? No, I don't. But I think it would improve a little bit in terms of the economy. There's businesses who are not trading on an equal basis now, in my patch, and they're desperate to do that.
But if that comes at the price, and the price is the youth mobility scheme, because I know how that blimmin' EU works. I spent enough time inside it. I mean, you know, should that be something that, you know, the Labour Party goes, OK, fine, we don't mind that?
I think there is reluctance in the government to be going back down that route, frankly. I think the Prime Minister is reluctant. He doesn't want to rerun the debate on leaving the EU. It was a terrible time in politics. I think it spoke to the fact that vast numbers of the country lost trust in politics as a result of the actual debate: should we leave or should we stay? And I think the Prime Minister is not keen to get in that again. But do I think that we should be looking towards a better alignment in terms of economic policy? I do think we should. There are 400 million people in the EU on our doorstep and we could trade with in a better way than we do now. Do I think that we need to improve a relationship with them in terms of defence and security? Yes, I do. Why? Because you can't rely on the US like we used to be able to, very probably. So those are the areas that I think we need to be in a better position with the EU on. But do I think we should be having a referendum to go back in? No, thank you very much. I think that would be a mistake, frankly.
And the youth mobility scheme?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid of free movement, to be honest. I think if I go to Europe and want to try and get a job and stay there and work, I don't think I should be put off from that. But I'm 55 years of age. It's unlikely. But if it's my daughter who's 9 now and in 8 years she's leaving school or whatever, college, do I think she should be allowed to go, and some French, German or whatever Spanish young person come here in the same vein? I think they should. I don't think we should be discouraging it, frankly. But look, that's the minor thing, isn't it? What's really important is where we go in terms of our alignment with the EU, in terms of economic policy, and I think that needs fast improvement.
Do you ever feel like you're in the wrong party, the way that the Labour Party is going at the moment?
I'm incredibly disappointed with the Labour Party, Alex. I'm incredibly disappointed with Keir Starmer's leadership in the way that I've described. I think he's done the right thing with Iran. Frankly, I think that took some bottle, because it's not easy to stand up to a president like Donald Trump, and he clearly did. Do I think we're going in the right direction in some forms of domestic policy? No, I don't. The one thing that's really, really angered me is this jury trial stuff, because it's been dishonest. It's been dishonest from the very outset. Anybody who's got the audacity to say this is a bad idea and it's not democratic, it's unjust, it's unworkable and it's unfair, have been accused of being rape apologists. That's not been very fair. That's not been very fair.
The madness of political debate in this day and age, Carl, honestly. It's been brilliant talking to you. It's the first time I've interviewed, actually. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Come back on again. Let's do this again one day.
Keen to come on again, and it's been a pleasure, Alex, and thanks for allowing me the opportunity.
Oh, we've loved it. The audience have loved it as well. Steve has said Carl Turner's in the wrong party. He's got common sense. There you go. You've got fans even amongst the talk audience. Carl Turner, MP for Labour for Hull East there. Right. Your thoughts, your messages, your calls are going to be coming up after this break. The number's on the screen if you want to get involved. 03444 991 is the number to dial if you want to have a chat with me live on air. You can also use that to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to text. If you're going to text, write the word talk before you send your message. I'll see you in just a moment.
think Donald Trump has a plan post-war?
A couple of weeks ago, when he started this off, he made a speech saying help would be on the way for the people. There was going to be regime change.
He appointed Mandelson against advice. We know this to be true. If this was a Conservative Prime Minister, the wider left would be absolutely screaming for his resignation.
Government's announced this afternoon, we're setting up a people's panel to work out exactly how you want us to roll out these digital IDs. We don't...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Got a little bit of news for you, which is that an Iranian man has been arrested after he tried to get into the naval base where our 4 nuclear submarines are. A 34-year-old, accompanied by a female of unknown nationality, was in a vehicle when he came up to HM Naval Base Clyde. They didn't have the passes to enter. They were turned away. They were then arrested for acting suspiciously in the vicinity. That was apparently that was 5 p.m. on Thursday. We were made aware of 2 people attempting to enter HMS Naval Base Clyde. This is where 4 Trident armed ballistic missile submarines are kept. It's also home to the Royal Navy's 7 Astute-class nuclear power attack submarines, which can fire Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles. Well, don't you worry about that. Doubt Starmer's going to deploy them anywhere anytime soon. But there you go. An Iranian man sniffing around. Quelle surprise. Right, let's do some messages. Let's do some calls. Let's speak first of all to Lois, who's in Essex. Hello there. Good afternoon, Lois.
Good afternoon, Alex. Brilliant show today. Enjoyed every minute of it.
Oh, why, thank you. You're very kind. Too kind.
Well, speak to people that know me, they wouldn't tell you that.
Now, what's on your mind? What do you want to talk about?
Oh, so where should we start? Monday night in London, how horrendous was that? I agree 100% with Nick, Timothy and Nigel on this. 100% it shouldn't be happening on our streets. And let's go over to Len.
Yeah,
no. Cooper? Oh my! I think she's actually a blithering idiot. Who gives money to countries that are so corrupt that they don't look after their own people for green things?
Oh, it's madness. It is utterly crazy. Madness. It's crazy. As someone who's, lived and worked across a lot of the developing world, I know full well that cash money doesn't end up going to vulnerable people. It's not digging wells and, vaccinating kids. Far from it. It's always the mad woke stuff instead, like driving some sort of, cultural agenda that usually is deeply unwelcome in these countries.
Exactly. Normally the money's going straight into a corrupt politician's pocket to line their pockets and buy their wives new handbags.
Yeah, no, very often it's buying Toyota Hiluxes, private jets, you name it. All the very things that do the opposite of tackling climate change. Lovely speaking to you, Lois. Thank you ever so much for your call, my darling. Let's speak to Daniel, who's in Middlesex. Hello there, Daniel.
Oh, hi, Alex.
Hello, my love. Right, what are your thoughts?
Oh, a little bit nervous now I've come online, so bear with me, all right?
Oh, don't you worry. It's only me. Just imagine we're sitting down the pub together having a big old cider and a chinwag.
Okay, I'll try. All right, okay, so the thing I want to talk about really is I've been listening to Talk for quite a while now, and I agree with virtually everything that's said on it. The thing that sort of stands out to me is unity. Now, we need to try and find our identity as a country. And I think that the way that we do that is if we unify. So we kind of stop fighting each other, which you do see sometimes in high streets and around Britain itself. But I think we also need to recollect our identity by deciding where we want to put our money and where we want to spend it. For example, halal meat. Now, I personally won't go to places that have halal meat. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the chains, but they're all up and down the high street. Now, I was walking around the other day looking for something to eat, takeaway shops, and quite frankly, I couldn't find one that didn't serve halal. And they basically advertise it in the window and everything, and it just seems like there's everybody so blazing that they'll just go in but then moan about it, as part of a wider problem. But we need to sort out the problem in hand is First and foremost, we need to get our values back and find out what we actually want. And that goes across the board, from everything where we get our hair cut to what we eat, what we consume, where we shop, where we put our money. If we restrict the money, we restrict the problem. What do you think?
Do you know what? I kind of agree with you there. We as consumers have we can play our own part, don't we? We don't need to keep buying rubbish from China because it's cheaper. We can actually try and buy British-only products. Similarly, if people have got an issue with halal meat, like you said, make a stand. I don't think we should be going around having a haircut at Turkish barbers if we think they're fronts of money laundering and people trafficking. We can all make decisions and play our own part in shaping the country. So, I totally agree with everything you said there. And Daniel, you had nothing to be worried about, did you? I think you did a sterling job. So I hope after that you're going to phone us again.
Well, I've got one more point as well. Am I allowed to make another point?
Of course you can. Fire
Very
away.
quickly. It's really quick. I'm just really worried about women in general, like the attitudes of this country. It seems like we're inviting in so many undocumented men, and we're turning a blind eye and almost dumbing down rape now to the point where desensitizing it.
Yeah.
There has to be an agenda, and I feel so scared for women in general.
Oh,
in
you
the
and
UK
me
right now.
both.
I wouldn't want to be one. It is absolutely scary beyond belief. And that
It's
was my
every
only
single
thought
day
was.
when you open the newspaper now. It's been Bristol, it's been Brighton, Bournemouth, everywhere. And it's terrifying. And I don't understand why there's not more outrage among the political class about this. It's almost like women are totally disposable. Well, it doesn't matter about grooming gangs. Oh, it doesn't matter if lots of women are getting raped by migrants living in hotels at our expense. Let's not talk about it. It might upset the apple cart. Disgusting. Daniel, thank you for your call. Thoroughly enjoyed it, mon liege. OK, let's take a short break now, because on the other side, we're going to have a right old treat. We're joined by our very own Aussie, Samara Gill, because she's going to be talking about what happened to Australia's Prime Minister when he was chased out of one of the country's largest mosques by angry Muslims. Yeah, it's quite a story, so don't go anywhere. That's what we're discussing after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, blimmin' heck, you reap what you sow, don't you? Don't you, Anthony Albanese? Because he's a fairly progressive man, is Mr Albanese. He's made a huge song and dance. He's a bit like the whole "Don't Look Back in Anger" after the atrocities on Bondi Beach. Well, he went to visit a mosque because it's coming to the end of Ramadan and it's the vogue thing to do, isn't it? But I don't really think his little visit went quite according to plan. Should we find out more? Here's Samara Gill. Hi, Samara.
Hi, Alex.
Oh, I'm loving this story. When I saw this one on social media, I was just like, oh, I've got to talk about this. So tell us all what happened.
Well, it's
pretty much exactly as you described with Anthony Albanese. This is someone who has completely pandered to the Muslim vote. He's our Labour Prime Minister, so it's a very similar sort of political leaning to what we have over here with Keir Starmer. He is they even look alike. He's basically Keir Starmer 2.0, like a sort of pound store version of him. And he did everything, He recognized Palestine. Even when we had the Bondi terrorist attack, he didn't even mention Islamism. All he mentioned was anti-Semitism. That's it. He didn't want to go the extra degree as to why it happened. He just wanted to talk about what happened. And he went to do the thing, as you say, that's fashionable at the moment, to turn up to these Eid celebrations, to get a couple votes in the bag, especially if you're on the Labour side. And he was heckled to no end. He had people shouting and screaming at him, "Get out! What are you doing?" This is mostly to do with his decision that he took before Keir Starmer to actually support America as an ally in the conflict that's going on right now. But it's true. You can do everything you want to pander to these communities, and still there will be fringe members who take massive issue with you. And I think that this is a cautionary tale for world leaders to actually take a look at and say, well, we actually can't win them all. They won't be pleased. Whatever you do, you are still the enemy because you haven't actually gone the full gambit with some of your policies.
Was he at sort of risk of any sort of physical violence or anything like that?
It's a really good question. I think he's got obviously massive security around him, being the Prime Minister and all that. But, Australia's got a very rich history of not respecting our politicians. I remember my dad I was talking to him this morning, and he was talking to me about how there was an interview going on with a past prime minister, and it was on a patch of grass on sort of a suburban street, and the resident had just patched that grass over, and the prime minister was standing on there that morning. And this is the country, this is Australia. The resident shouted actively at the prime minister while he was doing a press conference and said, "Mate, get off my grass. What are you doing on there?" And it's kind of like, you got to also love the element of the countries that we live in where you can do that to the prime minister and you are allowed to almost act as if they are a friend. But in terms of Anthony Albanese, I do think he's he's scared for his safety, because you could see in that video that we're showing now, this was kind of the after of what had happened. And he was almost gaslighting the public into saying, oh, it wasn't very scary. Nothing really happened. No, we've got the raw footage, Prime Minister. We can see that you were in absolute shock with your second in charge as well there, looking frightened for his life. They were not comfortable. That is a lie that they were.
I mean, Australia always seems to be one of the more sound countries on earth. You had turned back boats. We love to see it. We should copy it. But it seems like it's going a bit wonky. Which one's the more woke? Which is the worst out of Australia and the UK?
I mean, honestly, I think Australia is much more woke. Having been there, I think it's kind of, we are 5 years behind the UK. The UK is then 5 years behind the US. That's how I always like to look at things. And I think that we've gone completely out of control in Australia because we have had such a left-wing government for such a long time, and so many of those policies have completely infiltrated the highest sort of levels of legislation. So, we have got Islamophobia and discrimination laws in place, something that Albanese had such a hand in. Well, look how that's backfired on him. There's been public condemnations of anti-Muslim hate incidents. You've got a broader push for social cohesion. We're trying all of that. We were very, very nice to Gaza during that whole conflict. You had people in our parliament getting up and making speeches about the genocide and how horrible Israel is, and they were Labour people and they were able to get away with it. So I think it's all over the place. But, like with many political movements, it is going to correct itself, and we see ourselves going in a much more conservative direction. You've got Pauline Hanson, who I know is very close with Nigel Farage in terms of their policy alignment. She's polling the highest right now in our country. And that's no coincidence. That has happened because of the unfettered control of the left wing over in Australia. You know, something's got to give. Because you can see we're at boiling point with those videos right now. You can see there's no tolerance for our tolerance that we've been showing to that community.
Yeah, does Australia have a similar thing to the United Kingdom with massive balkanised communities, sort of like non-integrated Muslim communities?
Yes, we absolutely do. We've got no-go areas in Australia, and that's a recent phenomenon. You know, you're right. We actually probably do have a much better control over migration. We have no illegal migration, no border crossings or anything like that because of Operation Sovereign Borders, which was pioneered by Tony Abbott. But we still have communities that do silo themselves off and exist in their own. And we could see that from the Bondi terrorist attack, because those that father and son duo that decided to go and shoot up Jews like they were fish in a barrel were existing within the west of Sydney, which I know this won't mean anything for our UK audience, but that is a very sort of don't go there if you're not of a particular religion type of area. And I do think that police officers were scared to potentially go and do stop and searches, etc., because they were scared about being accused of Islamophobia or anything like that. So I think we're experiencing that. But because Australia is so spread out geographically and we are less on top of each other, I would say there's a little less than there is in the UK of that sort of that sectioning off, that ghettoisation of some communities.
What did you make of the mass call to prayer in Trafalgar Square?
You know, I think it's been interesting seeing some politicians have their political awakenings over this because they can see it so visually. I feel like people like you have been banging on about it for years, and it's hilarious seeing members of the Conservative Party come to and decide that this is the day they're going to put sort of ink to paper or thumb to Twitter and actually talk about it. But I mean, there are the arguments from Sadiq Khan that we've had Sikhism, we've had Christian, we've had all those different rallies. I didn't see them praying in the streets. I think I just don't understand why it couldn't have been done in a mosque. I think it's a very there's a lot of tension in communities at the moment. It's a tenuous time, and I just don't think it was appropriate. But Sadiq Khan is truly a believer. He's drunk the Kool-Aid a long time ago, and he does believe that a bunch of men, with women not included or at the back somewhere, is some sort of multiculturalism, unity, dynamic shift into a utopia that he sees Britain as. Well, I'm not sure that's that inclusive, in my opinion.
All right, inclusive at all. Samara, love you so much. See you later, my love. The wonderful Samara Gill, talk presenter there. She's brilliant. She's fabulous. Right, if you want to share your thoughts with me, the number is 03444991000. That's the number to call. You can also send me a WhatsApp on that number. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send me a text message. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you text. Well said, Samara. My cousin is in Oz and he wants to come home. Frightening. Love the show. Take care, girls, says Michael. Really, is that bad in Australia? See, in my mind, it's sort of like Australia to me is Ramsay Street. It's just like a place where you got like a little cafe and a bar and everyone knows each other and, but apparently not. I don't remember, seeing people visit mosques in Erinsborough. Sadiq praying in the street with a bunch of men shows how diversity really is his strength. Well, quite, there you go. Hi, Alex, says Keith in Nottingham. So Angela Rayner says that the government has an attitude to migrants as anti-British. So can someone please tell me what happened in Trafalgar Square? Certainly not British, is it? Well, no, exactly. I couldn't agree more. Right, going to take a short break now. Don't go anywhere. Keep your thoughts coming in. After the break, we're going to be talking about... so Essex Police have this live facial recognition rollout, where essentially it's supposed to be detecting people committing crimes, looking for patterns. Well, unfortunately, the pattern that was identified was a certain demographic seemed to be dominating the people being picked up by the cameras, and so they've had to cancel it. I wonder why. We're going to be discussing that with the brilliant Mike Neville just after this.
think Donald Trump has a plan post-war?
A couple of weeks ago, when he started this off, he made a speech saying help would be on the way for the people. There was going to be regime change.
He appointed Mandelson against advice. We know this to be true. If this was a Conservative Prime Minister, the wider left would be absolutely screaming for his resignation.
Government's announced this afternoon, we're setting up a people's panel to work out exactly how you want us to roll out these digital IDs. We don't want them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, you lucky devils, you get to enter a competition. I probably don't. There must be in the T's and C's sort of rule that talk presenters can't enter the talk competition, which is a shame because I'd love to. It's really up my street because we're giving you the chance to win not just one, two hospitality tickets to the blimmin' British Grand Prix, which is taking place Sunday the 5th of July, with the full racing green trackside experience. It's the ultimate setup for race day. Honestly, this is making me sick to my stomach. I really want to do this. You'll get exclusive grandstand seats, cool, at the Loop and Village corners, good corners, plus inner track access to watch the drivers arriving at the paddock. Honestly, it's like my dream. Not only that, you get the little shuttle bus so you can get onto the site easily, racing simulators, live music between sessions, all-day street food, and an open bar. Have a listen.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 20th of March 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Oh, that is so cool. I want to go. That looks amazing. I don't even know what I'm going to do with my life for the next month, given all the Middle Eastern Grand Prix have had to be cancelled. Just as I got used to Formula One being back again after the long winter break, it's been snatched away. Cruelly deprived of my favourite sport. But there you go. Good luck. I highly recommend entering that. It's the perfect Silverstone race day experience for any F1 fan. And you know, even if you're not an F1 fan, you don't know what you're missing. Enter anyway. You can take it from me. Go into a Formula One race. There is nothing like it, especially if you get all the hospitality and stuff. And the British Grand Prix is iconic. It is basically the best Grand Prix. It really is. It's an amazing circuit. Lots of overtaking. This season, they're really jostling as well on track, which is exciting. And, of course, this season, current world champion, Lando Norris, British. I think the world champion this year could well end up being George Russell. And Lewis Hamilton's back. Ferrari's doing okay. We imagine Silverstone with 3 British drivers on the podium. That is the dream. Anyway, good luck if you are entering that competition. Like I said, I'm rather envious. I'd like to enter it myself, but no doubt I'm not allowed. OK, let's talk now about shoplifting, shall we? First of all, let's have a little listen to Kemi Badenoch first on shoplifting.
When you see someone doing that, would you intervene?
I think it depends on how big they are.
Good answer. And similarly,
but yes, broadly would be my instinct. I think people should look after their personal safety. I think those people who are stronger should do more. I know that there is now a tendency for people not to put themselves in harm's way, but I also think that sometimes we need to send a message that this is not acceptable. I mean, Lucinda's is a different kind of shop. A lot of the shoplifting we see is of people stealing little bits of pieces from Greg's bakery. Sausage rolls are under lock and key. That's not how things used to be. I think we should be able to say, no, stop that.
Lock up your daughters, lock up your sausage rolls. Right, let's speak to Mike Neville, former Met Police detective, who knows a thing or two about things like facial recognition, which we are going to be moving on to. But, Mike, do you recommend listening to Kemi Badenoch's advice and intervening when you see someone nicking stuff?
Well, I have a tendency to do this because I'm a bit stupid, I suppose. I intervened on the tube the other day when there was some, not stealing, but some rather vulgar young men whose language was disgraceful. And I actually spoke to them. I said, there's women on this tube and you were frightening them with your disgusting behaviour. What sums up the modern generation? One of them said, oh, that's rather sexist. And I said, well, I'm doing what my mother taught me. And once I'd said something, a young African lady said, yeah, he's right, this is disgusting. And an older couple said, yeah, we back you up. And these clowns actually shut up. But sometimes it just needs somebody to say no. But the trouble, what people see, of course, we had the tragic case up in Milton Keynes last month where a security guard intervened and was stabbed because many of these thieves, they've got used to stealing. So the moment somebody says no or tries to stop them, they're pulling out a knife or a dirty needle or something like that. So I suppose I'm one of the stupid ones, but sometimes we've got to do the right thing.
Oh no, I couldn't. I totally agree, but I'd be terrified about doing something. Although I have actually, in my own little way, tried to prevent a shoplifter. When I lived in London, I was coming out of, I was in Marks and Spencer on Earls Court Road, and people were coming in, filling up their bags full of like meats and all the rest of it. On the Co-op on Earls Court Road, they actually have to have GPS trackers on the meats. Like steaks are in these sort of plastic cases now. Anyway, as the guy was running out the shop, I thought, well, I can't intervene, but I did stick my foot out, and I did manage to sort of semi-trip him up, but unfortunately he didn't actually fall over, so he carried on his merry way. So there you are. I tried to have my little moment of heroism, unsuccessfully. Let's talk about this absolutely crazy thing, where there's been a trial of live facial recognition cameras. These cameras are basically mounted on top of vans, as I understand. They're designed to identify people on watch lists if they pass by. Essex police has had to pause the use because they say there's potential bias in the positive identification rate, because this equipment was identifying around half of people on the watch list, and it's very rare for someone to be flagged up if they weren't on the watch list, but apparently it was statistically significantly more likely to correctly identify black people than other ethnicities. And they've said, well, we've had to fiddle with the algorithms. What's going on here? Is it just that, look, at the end of the day, there might be a sort of disproportionate representation of certain people committing certain crimes, or is it really that these cameras, for some reason, are just better off identifying black faces than others?
Well, I think it's the latter, what you say. So, yes, there is evidence that different ethnic groups do commit different crimes. I've been on here about stabbings in London and grooming gangs, and, you know, white people commit different types of crime. But in this circumstance, it is the bizarre situation that it's been more accurate around black faces. Now, the odd thing is all the criticisms in the past is that facial recognition, and you only have to watch at the airport, really, if you stood and watched, it would be not as good at picking out Asian and black faces or women's faces in particular. So it's this really odd situation where they're pulling it for being too accurate. It's not to do with the volume of crime committed by certain groups, but the trouble with all this is, Alex, they're stupid, the police, and I've told them this time and time again. They deploy technology, and then they rely on an officer who looks at the screen. So what happens is that the machine, beep, 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 an alarm goes off, and it'll say, look, the person who's coming towards us is one of these, and it'll show an array of 10 faces. And the officer has got to make a decision and say, oh, it's number 5. But we know from research, Professor Davis at Greenwich University has shown that 98% of people are just no good at this. You know, I worked in the police with the Super Recogniser Squad. We have people who never forget face, and they're the people, and Essex Police have got some of these people. Other police, Hertfordshire, use these people. The Met, of course, don't use them. They just give officers a briefing, and it's unfair on the officer who's got to make the choice, because then it's on them that they've made a wrongful arrest. So the situation or the solution is very, very simple, and I've offered to help the police with this, but they're too clever to take it.
I mean, what is the purpose of these? Sort of, you know, if it's sitting there and it pings every time someone's on a watch list, do the police, what happens then? Do they sort of just, I don't know, record where they are? Do they jump out and arrest them? I don't really understand.
Yes. So what happens, Alex? You've got, let's say we go to, I'm from Bolton, you go to Bolton Town Centre, there's a lot of scoundrels who are wanted for thieving or robbery. So you put them on the watch list, and you put the camera somewhere where, you know, people are funneled through, you know, like a narrow street or something. And then the computer looks at them and says, oh, that's the guy who's wanted for theft. That's the guy who's wanted for a stabbing or whatever else. And everybody else, it just looks at them and dismisses what's happened. But as I've said, the real problem is who is the person who sits in the back and says, that is the right person. And the other way they get arrested, of course, a lot of the arrests come from the police officers just do normal police work, because some people try and see the camera and they try and dodge it. And so they're obviously worth speaking to because they're up to no good. So a lot of the arrests come from that rather than the technology.
Oh, fascinating stuff. Mike, thank you ever so much for joining us. Mike Neville there, former Met Police detective. Right, let's do some messages, shall we? Here we go. Ooh, Danny says the art of the game is establish a mosque, the Muslims come, they then have a presence. Look at the Lake District. We built churches, but we were just religious, not political. I do think the building of this mega mosque in the Lake District is, well, questionable, to say the very least. It does concern me. Stewpot. Great name, Stewpot. Have a feeling that probably wasn't your birth name. Says, what we are witnessing is the Islamification of Europe. I'll tell you what, you know, we have it bad in this country, but if you really want to see how bad things get, it is worth looking at Belgium. It is worth looking at France. And I have a feeling that this big sort of, you know, mass prayer ceremony in Trafalgar Square will lead to a lot more open praying in the streets in the United Kingdom. It's been going on in France a very long time in the banlieue, where they just fill up the whole street, get out all their prayer mats. And it's, look, I'm sorry, it's being done deliberately. It's being done politically. It is being done because in some regards, Islam is a campaigning religion. Let's speak, shall we, to Stephen, who's in Worthing. Hello, Stephen. Good afternoon.
Alex, thank you for taking my call. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Right, what is on your mind?
The fairness, equal. Let me get it out. My son has got a lecture today on misogyny.
Right.
Okay, terrific, wonderful. However, the school with Islam, they don't address this. And what I'm saying is it's a double standards, which really, really angers me. Every lady should be respected. Every human being should be respected. But the Islamic faith don't, and the schools are pumping this out. Everyone's equal, but it's only the white man, which is misogynistic.
Right. No, it's funny, isn't it? I was watching that Manosphere documentary the other day where Louis Theroux goes and speaks to all these influencers with ridiculous names. I'd never heard of half of them because I'm not a 12-year-old boy. But what's interesting was all these deeply vile, disgusting men who just, you know, degrading towards women, think it's big and smart to sort of, you know, suggest treating women badly and abusing them and using them. It's interesting, isn't it, how many of them suddenly go, oh, I'm a Muslim now. You know, Andrew Tate did it. He converted to Islam. Someone else called Shoopy Doopy or something, he did the same. And you think, yeah, I wonder why. I wonder why that religion seems to be so appealing to the manosphere.
All I'm saying is for the schools, if they're going to address this subject, then they should address this subject when it comes to religious faith, Islam in particular.
No, I agree. But it's all very well, you know, having the whole, we've got to be kind, Me Too movement when it comes to the hierarchy of victimhood. We know who's at the top.
Yes, us being fair and equal playing field, they just look at us as upon as being weak, and that's where it all falls down.
Indeed it is. Stephen, thank you ever so much for your call. It's been lovely chatting to you. All right, Mr. Collins.
Hello.
Did you enjoy the call to prayer? Did you go? Were you there?
I didn't go, but you see, Julia mentioned this the other day. You know, when something doesn't sit right with you, you can't necessarily articulate. So I was looking at the Jewish gathering in Trafalgar Square. 17 years it's been going. Sadiq Khan attends every single year, much bigger than the one we saw the other day. So why does that not sit in the same place as
What do they do at the Jewish gathering?
Lights.
So this is
a lot of lights.
So this is the thing, when they have the Diwali party in Trafalgar, it's sort of Bhangra music and nosh. It's not like,
see,
you know...
there's something about, I don't know what it is. Is it just raw cultural differences?
Well, and at the end of the day, it's because there's one religion in this country that has been behind grooming gangs. It seems to be largely behind the incoming, you know, our new arrivals who are abusing women. That's behind terror attacks. That's why it's uncomfortable.
So it sits in that category for that reason. Yeah, of course. Because there is something, there's no doubt about it. I could pretend this isn't the case, but it's not.
But also, you know, there's this sense, isn't it? We've all got EQ, and there's a sense that this was